Chapter 1434. Qiumanyu laughed when she saw Li Jinan's dumbfounded expression. Li Beixing was a little smug. He stepped forward and patted Li Jinan on the shoulder meaningfully. He said, "Third brother, you're the only one left. Look at your second brother. He's about to have his second child. Uncle Carrie." Li Jinrui moved past Li Jinan and reached out to Li Beixing. Li Beixing picked up the little girl and asked, "Can you let your little uncle marry a little aunt for you?" Li Jinrui didn't know that much. She blinked and said, "Do you mean to let little uncle marry a wife?" Li Beixing touched the little girl's nose and said, "Smart child." When Li Jinrui heard that, she smiled and said, "Okay, let uncle marry a wife. That way, uncle will have someone to sleep with at night." The little girl's words made Qin Shuhua smile. She asked, "Why should uncle find someone to sleep with?" Li Jinrui was stumped by the question. She tilted her head and thought for a while before saying, "In our family, other than uncle and great-grandfather, everyone else sleeps in pairs. Great-grandfather is old, so he won't be afraid. Uncle is only a little younger than dad. He should find a wife to sleep with so he won't be afraid." However, as she spoke, her voice became softer and softer. She said in distress, "But uncle is a man. Why would he be afraid?" Li Jinrui's words made everyone present unable to restrain their laughter. Li Jinan chuckled and said, "That's right. Why would uncle be afraid?" Li Jinrui couldn't figure it out. She frowned and tilted her head for a long time. "I don't want to think anymore. Where are your parents?" "They're in the room. Dad is chatting with little brother." I think dad is so silly. Little brother doesn't know how to speak." As Li Jinrui spoke, she struggled to get down and said, "Uncle, I'm going to play with big brother. You can play with auntie." The little girl quickly got down and ran inside. Li Beixing smiled and sat next to Qiumanyu. He said, "Time passes so quickly. Second brother's 2 children can already run and jump. In the blink of an eye, the second child is about to be born." Sigh. Qiumanyu glanced at him and snorted. "If you had taken the initiative just now, our children would also be running around." Li Beixing suddenly felt a little embarrassed. He chuckled and drank a cup of tea to hide his embarrassment, not saying anything. Li Jinan felt that there was more to it than met the eye. With a smile in his eyes, he raised his eyebrows and said, "It looks like you've decided on it. When did it start?" "It's been a long time, maybe 2 or 3 years. You're the only one. I heard that you've been very busy recently, flying here and there on business trips. What do you think? It's better to be in the army, isn't it?" Li Beixing tossed a cigarette to Li Jinan and asked, "You can't go on like this. Why don't you ask Grandpa to find you a partner like second brother? You can just get married and be done with it." Li Jinan took the cigarette and immediately shook his head. He replied, "That won't do." As he spoke, he lit the cigarette. "There's no rush. When the time comes, I'll bring it back for you to see." Li Beixing understood him very well. Hearing this, he composed himself and said with a smile, "Yo, you have a target now?" His gaze was mischievous and probing. Li Jinan subconsciously thought of Yi Yu's blushing face when she faced him. He took a puff of his cigarette and chuckled without saying a word. Such a reaction was unintentionally a tacit agreement. Chapter 1435. When he heard his mother's words, Li Jinan lit his cigarette and laughed. "Don't worry. It won't happen." When Qin Shuhua saw the expression on Li Jinan's face, she knew that he had a target in mind. She smiled from ear to ear and said, "Wow, all 3 of my sons have matured. They know how to get a wife. When are you bringing her home for me to take a look? I'll help you identify her." Li Jinan took a puff of his cigarette and shook his head. "We haven't even gotten married yet. When the time is right, I'll bring her home." Qin Shuhua's smile became even brighter. She nodded her head and said, "As long as you know what you're doing. Don't worry." With that, she looked at Qiumanyu and asked, "When are you planning to get married?" Qiumanyu didn't say a word. She looked at Li Beixing. With a serious expression, Li Beixing replied, "The sooner the better. I can wait, but the children can't wait." When he said that, the people around them were even more shocked. At that moment, Captain Li Sun walked out. When he heard that, shock appeared on his wizened face. He asked, "What? The girls are all pregnant?" The old man's voice had obviously aged a lot. From afar, he looked old with a hunched back and a head of white hair. Su Chinsi helped Grandpa walk out carefully. When she heard the news, she seemed to be very surprised and said, "Brother, is that true?" Qiumanyu's face was a little red. She glared at Li Beixing. Li Beixing didn't seem to realize that he had done anything wrong. He smiled and said, "Yeah. If I'm not careful, I might get pregnant." That's why I say the sooner the better. When Li Jinan heard that, he sighed even more. He shook his head and chuckled. You're too fast. Of course. I'm the big brother. If I'm fast, you won't have an excuse to reject me. Li Beixing held Xiaomanyu's hand and said, Mom, let's eat. I'm hungry. Qin Shuhua was even happier. She stood up and happily walked over to the phone. She said, all right. Hurry up and get to the table. I'll call your father and ask him to come home early. When Li Xiqing came out, he was followed by two little boys, one in his arms. On his cold and tough face there was a slight smile. Captain Li looked at his children and grandchildren and smiled even more happily. Patting Su Qianxi's hand, he looked at Su Qianxi's belly, which was not yet visible, and then at Xiaomanyu's belly, which was not yet flat. He said, you have to quickly name your child. Don't look back. If I leave, you won't even have the chance to name your child. Nonsense. Su Qianxi immediately retorted and said with some dissatisfaction, you are in good health. Exactly. The crisp voice of a little girl could be heard. Li Jianyue shouted, long live great-grandfather. Great-grandfather will live to a ripe old age. Great-grandfather is only 75 years old now. There are still 25 years to go. Li Jianxian chimed in and said, in another 25 years, great-grandfather, my son will be born. When the time comes, great-grandfather will help me choose a name for him. Me too. Me too. Li Mosen joined in the fun and said, great-grandfather, the names great-grandfather come up with are very nice. The children's crisp words brought tears to Captain Li's eyes. He nodded his head and said, yes, yes. Great-grandfather wants to live until then. However, as he said those words, his withered and aged hands trembled slightly. Li Sun was well aware of that. No one knew if he could live until then. Chapter 1436. Li Xiao walked in from the outside and saw his children and grandchildren. Especially when he saw Li Beixing and Xiaomanyu by his side, his experienced and shrewd eyes were filled with joy. When Su Qianxi saw Li Xiao, she called out, Dad. Grandpa. Hello, Grandpa. Dad. The greetings came one after another. Li Xiao felt an inexplicable warmth in his heart. He smiled brightly and said, let's take a family photo. The so-called family photo was a happy moment when the whole family was gathered together. Captain Li Sun sat in the middle and the children stood beside him. Behind them were Li Xiao and his wife, Li Beixing and his wife, and Li Jinan. There were not too many people and not too few people. When the Polaroid took down the photo, Captain Li's eyes reddened when he saw it. Good, very good. Li Jianyue was a little confused. She blinked her eyes and stared into her great-grandfather's eyes, but she didn't say anything. She grabbed the photo and squatted down beside Captain Li to take a closer look. Li Xiqing took out the DSLR and took a few photos. It wasn't just a family photo. He also took a close-up of everyone and captured everyone's smiling faces. Every couple had a group photo. There were also photos of a few little guys squatting, running, jumping, and laughing. But when it was Li Jinan's turn, he was alone. His posture was tall and straight and his eyes were sharp. He was strong and muscular. When Li Jinan saw his own photo, he couldn't help but add another person to his mind. If only Yi Yuyu was standing by his side, that would be great. I have to quickly get her to divorce Shen Luohan. As he thought about it, the people around them started to make a ruckus. The family of more than 10 people sat at the dining table. It was lively. The old man ate slowly, his face full of smiles and kindness. After the meal, Xiaomanyu and Li Beixing accompanied the old man for a walk. The children brought them along to play. Li Jinan sat on the sofa with a cigarette in his mouth. He didn't light it. He sat opposite Su Qianxi and looked at her belly. He asked, how long has it been? More than 2 months. The baby is very healthy. Su Qianxi reached out to touch her belly with a smile on her face. She looked very happy and turned to look at Li Xiqing. Li Xiqing held her arm and glanced at the cigarette in Li Jinan's mouth. He said, pregnant women are not allowed to smoke here. Li Jinan smiled helplessly and waved his hand. All right. I didn't smoke. You really have a girlfriend? Li Xiqing was still in disbelief. Do I know her? Li Jinan shook his head. Not yet. I'm working hard. Holding his wife's hand, he said, the day after tomorrow is Oming's wedding. If possible, it would be best if you could trick her into coming here to meet him. That's right. Li Jinan laughed and said, I'm not that easy. I'll try. Grandpa is getting old and you are the only single man left in the family. You have to be ambitious and see if you can let Grandpa hold your child. Li Xiqing's voice was not loud, but his words were sharp. Li Jinan felt a little uncomfortable. He pursed his lips and nodded his head. When he thought of Yi Yuyu and Shen Luo's current situation, he sighed and said, "I'll try my best." Yi Yuyu's attitude was very clear. Whether it was forced or an accident, she was willing to be with him. Chapter 1437. With that thought in mind, Li Jinan's brows furrowed. His sharp, almond-shaped eyes were filled with calculation. Judging from Shen Luo's attitude, he didn't seem willing to divorce Yi Yuyu. Since there were those rumors about him and his sister, it proved that Shen Luo wasn't gay. So why was Shen Luo, a healthy and mentally sound man, so indifferent to his wife? If Li Jinan wanted them to get a divorce, he had to start with that. Narrowing his eyes, Li Jinan tapped the cigarette in his hand and quickly stood up. "I'm going out for a while." With that, he turned and left without waiting for their response. Li Xiqing didn't mind. With his wife in his arms, he looked down at her belly and said, "Your uncle is in love. We have to understand him." Su Qinxi snorted and pushed his head away. "Go away. The baby's heart just started beating. Who are you talking to?" Li Xiqing didn't mind at all. The corners of his lips curled up. After Li Jinan left the house, he drove his car out onto the main road. He rolled down the windows and the wind blew in, making Li Jinan shiver. He picked up the phone and dialed Mila's number. Mila wasn't only Yi Yuyu's manager, but she had also been her good friend for many years. If there was anything he could ask Mila, he would have a clue. Indeed, after hearing Li Jinan's question, Mila thought for a moment and replied, "Yuyu's husband and Yuyu grew up together. Yuyu and I were classmates and we often hung out with them. Shen Luo is a very warm person, and he treats Yuyu especially well. When we were in college, something happened to Yuyu's sister, and Yuyu was in a coma for about a week. She took a month off from school. Not long after she woke up, she moved out of her stepfather's house. She didn't contact me for a long time, but I heard that she didn't have a good relationship with her family, and she rarely saw Shen Luo." Mila's words were concise and to the point. Li Jinan couldn't help but fall into deep thought. After thinking for a moment, he asked, "When did she marry Shen Luo?" Well, Mira thought about it. It was probably in the first half of last year. It wasn't a long time, but after they got married, Yuyu didn't seem very happy and they often lived apart. Mira was a shrewd person. At this point, she already knew where to stop. "GM Li, when Yuyu was hospitalized, I was too busy and only visited a few times. However, I heard from Yuyu's biological sister that Senior Shen only visited once. Other than medical fees, he didn't even visit. Such a heartless man. I really feel bad for Yuyu." "Yi Yuyu's sister? Is it the one who was injured earlier?" "No, the injured one's surname is Guan. She's Yuyu's stepfather's daughter. The one taking care of her in the hospital is surnamed Yi. They share the same father and mother." "Did that stepsister visit Yuyu during that period?" Li Jinan asked. Mira laughed. "Guan Kui went crazy a few years ago. How could she have visited her? It was also from that time that Yuyu's relationship with the people around her deteriorated. Everyone insisted that Yuyu was the one who pushed her down. But I believe that Yuyu isn't that kind of person." Li Jinan's frown deepened. After some thought, he nodded his head and said, "I got it. In that case, the turning point was Yi Yuyu's sister. Everyone insisted that Yi Yuyu was the one who pushed her stepsister down, and Yi Yuyu had been unconscious for more than a week. In that case, the problem must have arisen during that week. There had to be a connection between that and Shen Luo, and that." Chapter 1438. After hanging up, Li Jinan smoked a cigarette in the car. Then he slowly started the car. The Bentley was very eye-catching on the road. When it stopped in front of Yi Yuyu's apartment, it attracted a lot of attention. After parking the car, Li Jinan called Yi Yuyu from downstairs. Yi Yuyu seemed to be busy. It rang a few times before she picked up. However, it wasn't Yi Yuyu's voice that came through. It was another woman's voice. "Hello." Li Jinan could tell that it was Yi Yuyu's sister, Yi Qianqian. "Hello, I'm looking for Yi Yuyu. Yuyu is taking a shower. Why are you looking for her?" Yi Qianqian seemed a little tired. She was yawning as she replied lazily. Li Jinan was silent for a moment before saying, "When she's done, ask her to come downstairs. I'll be at the entrance of your apartment." When Yi Qianqian heard that, she immediately perked up. Her eyes lit up as she said, "Really? Let me see." Yi Qianqian ran to the window of the back room and looked down. She immediately saw the eye-catching Bentley. The luxurious black body of the car was eye-catching at a glance. Yi Qianqian felt that her eyes were about to shine. She asked, What car are you driving? Li Jinan was silent for a moment before asking, is there a problem? I only saw a Bentley. Is it yours? Yeah. Is you done? Li Jinan's voice was a little dull as he slowly lit a cigarette. Not yet. I'll go rush her. As he said that, Li Jinan heard the sound of slippers hitting the wooden floor. It was followed by Yi Chanshan shouting, your GM Li is looking for you. When Li Jinan heard that, he couldn't help but laugh. For some reason he was in a good mood. Your GM Li? Or GM Li? Yeah, this sister is pretty good. I'll have to be filial to her in the future. Li Jinan took a puff of his cigarette and waited for the response. Soon Yi Chanshan replied, GM Li, Yu is done, but she doesn't seem to be in a good mood. Would you like to come up and have a seat? Li Jinan hadn't expected that Yi Chanshan would invite him up. He had originally thought that she wouldn't welcome a stranger. Li Jinan was more than happy to have such an opportunity. When he heard the suggestion, Li Jinan pretended to mull it over for a moment before replying, all right. Hold on. I'll stop the car. When Yi Chanshan saw the flashy Bentley limousine slowly moving forward, her heart filled with excitement. She jumped up and said, are you done showering? A guest is coming up. Yu had just turned off the water. When she heard Yi Chanshan's words, she wiped her body with a towel and asked loudly, who is it? Is it your friend? Male or female? A man. Not my friend, your friend. My friend. Yu was a little confused. She dried her hair and walked out in her bathrobe. Who is it? She asked. Your President Li. I invited him up. Yu was taken aback. She frowned and asked, what? GM Li? What was he doing here? And why did you call him up? This is so awkward. Chapter 1439. Yi Chanshan was speaking from the bottom of her heart. Regardless of whether it was in terms of looks, background, or ability, Li Jinan was better than Shenluo Han. If she could be with Li Jinan, all the suffering Yi Yu had endured wouldn't have been in vain. Yi Yu was pushed into the room. She rubbed her hair with exasperation and said, I'm going to blow dry my hair. Yi Chanshan almost cried out when she heard that. Is this silly sister of mine finally getting the hang of it? She was so happy that her face bloomed. Yi Chanshan quickly replied, yes. Don't be too hasty. Not long after Yi Yu entered the room, the doorbell rang. Yi Chanshan opened the window. When she saw Li Jinan's handsome face, she was overjoyed. After she opened the door, she immediately welcomed him in and said, GM Li, what a rare visitor. Yu is still inside. Please come in and take a seat. The moment Li Jinan walked in, Yi Chanshan could smell the scent of cigarettes on him. Yi Chanshan took a whiff and casually asked, GM Li, do you smoke? Li Jinan turned his head and glanced at her. He nodded his head and replied, I just smoked one. Is the smell strong? Why don't I stand at the door for a while? Yi Chanshan quickly waved her hands. No. It's fine. I don't mind. Come on in. Li Jinan found Yi Chanshan interesting. He pursed his lips and looked down at the slippers on her feet. Do you need to change your shoes? He asked. No. Yi Chanshan walked in. Just treat this like your own home. She raised her voice and called out, GM Li is here. Are you ready? Yu didn't reply. Li Jinan walked in and sat down on the sofa naturally. He replied, it's fine. I'll wait a while. It's nothing urgent. Yi Chanshan felt that this man was full of gentlemanliness. She poured a glass of fruit juice for Li Jinan and handed it to him with both hands. She then sat down in front of him and whispered, GM Li, you seem to like our Yu a lot. Li Jinan nodded his head. His expression was natural as he replied, I do. Yi Chanshan was pleasantly surprised. Is it the kind of liking that I understand? It should be. Yi Chanshan clapped her hands and said, that makes things easier. Actually, GM Li, I won't hide it from you. Yu must have told you that she's actually married. She was married to Shenluo, and before. Do you know Shenluo, and? He's one of the imperial capital's 3 young masters, who's known as the Ghost Doctor. Li Jinan's expression was natural. He nodded his head and replied, I've heard a little about it. I'm aware of the incident as well. But I heard that his private life isn't very discreet. With his sister, Tisk, Yi Chanshan looked as if she had found a confidant. She was a little excited as she said, Yeah. Isn't that right? That kind of thing is not worthy of our Yu at all, but he refuses to get a divorce. God knows how much my heart aches for our Yu. When she was injured and hospitalized, he only came once. After paying the medical fees, he never came again. What can I do? I'm also very desperate. Behind such a long line of foreshadowing, there must be a big plan. Li Jinan nodded and followed her words. He asked, it's quite miserable. So, what do you think I should do to make it more appropriate? Chapter 1440. When Yi Qianshan said that, she deliberately observed Li Jinan's reaction. His expression remained impassive. She couldn't tell if he was happy or angry. Yi Qianshan cursed in her heart. Yet another person who can't see his true colors. However, Yi Qianshan hardened her heart and continued egging him on. You have to know that when a girl is vulnerable, it's easiest for her to fall in love with another person. Now that our Yu has suffered a setback in her relationship, she's extremely disappointed in Shenluo An. If that were to be written into a novel, it would be a tragic story. At this time, you want me to take advantage of the situation? Li Jinan interrupted her. His words hit the nail on the head. Yi Qianshan's words were stuck in her throat. She was a little embarrassed. She instinctively said, that's not what I meant. Can I smoke? Li Jinan was in a strange mood. He looked at Yi Qianshan with his almond-shaped eyes and interrupted her. Perhaps because the topic was a little off topic, Yi Qianshan was stunned for a moment before she nodded her head. Sure. Li Jinan took out his pack of cigarettes and took one out. He didn't light it. He played with it in his hand and slowly said, I'm working on it, but I think I'll need your cooperation. Yi Qianshan's eyes lit up. She clicked her tongue and said excitedly, I can tell that you're a passionate person. What are you talking about? Yi Yuyu's voice came from inside. The two of them turned their heads at almost the same time. They immediately saw Yi Yuyu in her light blue pajamas. Yi Yuyu's hair had just been blow-dried. It was draped over her shoulders. She didn't have any makeup on. Her face was a little pale and she looked a little thin. Li Jinan looked at her and frowned. He asked, have you finished eating? Yi Yuyu hadn't expected that to be the first thing he would say when she arrived. She immediately replied, yes. Okay. Li Jinan took out a match and lit his cigarette. Let's go. Ha. Yi Yuyu was a little confused. Where are we going? To eat supper. Li Jinan stood up and took a drag of his cigarette. She exhaled a puff of white smoke that brushed past her almond-shaped eyes. Li Jinan's eyes narrowed slightly and he said in a firm tone, you're too skinny. You need to put on some weight. Yi Qianshan quickly nodded in agreement and said, yeah, I think so too. Let's go. We had dinner in the afternoon and it's been 3 or 4 hours. It's time for supper. You go and get changed. Yi Yuyu replied, I'm not hungry. I have something to tell you. Li Jinan looked at her and said, leave us. Yi Qianshan felt as if her maiden heart was about to explode. The way he spoke and the way he smoked. Wasn't that exactly how she imagined her dream man to be? Oao. Unfortunately, the grass was already taken, and it was his own sister. However, at least it wasn't eaten by other people's cows, so it wasn't a loss. Yi Yuyu didn't feel like going out and said, if you have anything to say, say it here. My sister isn't an outsider. Yeah, let's go together. Li Jinan gently flicked the ash into the trash can and said, let's get together. Yi Qianshan gave Li Jinan a thumbs up in her heart and nodded her head. Okay, let's go together. In order to make it easier for Li Jinan to take advantage of the situation, as his future sister-in-law, she had to be cooperative. Chapter 1441. Yi Yuyu's words were stuck in her throat. She was speechless. Looking at Yi Qianshan, she couldn't resist her moral blackmail. After changing her clothes, the living room was filled with the faint smell of tobacco when she walked out. Li Jinan was tall and dressed simply, but his aura couldn't be concealed. They went down the stairs and found a restaurant. Yi Qianshan ordered a few things and left the decision to Li Jinan. Li Jinan had just finished dinner, so he wasn't hungry. He followed his memory and ordered a few dishes that Yi Yuyu might like before throwing the menu back. Yi Yuyu sat to the side and appeared very obedient. She asked, Jim Lee, why are you looking for me so late at night? Yeah. My friend is getting married the day after tomorrow. Why don't you come along? Li Jinan tapped his fingers on the table. Be my female companion. Hey, the friend you're talking about isn't Ming, is it? Yi Qianshan asked. I'm going too, but Lily seems to have invited Shenluo, Anne's sister. Her name is Manting or something. Isn't it a little inappropriate for Yi Yuyu to be the female companion? Li Jinan raised his eyebrows and asked, is that so? Yeah. It's fine. It's fine as long as I'm coming. Anyway, I'm just here to be a part of Ming's wedding. Li Jinan took a sip of tea and said slowly, after you get divorced we can go back to being the main characters. Yi Yuyu was caught off guard by his unexpected words. She coughed lightly and looked at Yi Qianqian guiltily. She immediately noticed Yi Qianqian's gossipy eyes. She picked up a teacup and took a sip. "Oh, I'll be there when you get married." Yi Yuyu's meaning couldn't be clearer. She was trying to distance herself from Li Jinan in front of Yi Qianqian. Li Jinan acted as if he didn't understand. He nodded his head and said, "Yeah. I heard that Ming prepared 3 wedding dresses for his wife. I'll prepare 4 for you. You can't lose out to him." Yi Yuyu almost choked on her tea. The tea got stuck in her throat and she started coughing violently. She didn't know if it was because she was choking, but her face turned red. Li Jinan frowned slightly. He reached out and patted Yi Yuyu's back lightly. "Why are you so careless? Don't you know how to drink water?" Yi Yuyu coughed even more violently. She reached out to push his hand away and shook her head. She pretended that she couldn't see or hear anything. She took a sip of tea and savored it carefully. With a heartfelt sigh she said, "This tea is pretty good." Li Jinan was in a good mood. He casually replied, "It's all right." At this moment, the waiter served the crispy fried pork tenderloin and placed it on the plate. Yi Yuyu felt as if she had been granted amnesty. She immediately picked up her chopsticks, picked up a piece and stuffed it into her mouth. As she chewed on the meat she stopped talking. Li Jinan seemed to have thought of something and asked, "What do you think?" Yi Yuyu pretended not to hear him as she ate. She buried her head in her bowl. When Li Jinan saw her behavior, the corners of his mouth lifted up imperceptibly. He pretended not to notice and said in a serious tone, "If it's not enough, we can add more." "GM Li," Yi Yuyu couldn't take it anymore. She interrupted Li Jinan. Her tone sounded forced and stiff as she said, "I'm hungry." Chapter 1442. Yi Yuyu suddenly felt like she couldn't eat anymore. It was unbearable. Yi Qianqian looked at the sky. She couldn't see. In that instant Yi Qianqian felt that it had been a mistake to follow them. However, based on their reactions, their relationship didn't seem to be as simple as it seemed. After the meal, Yi Yuyu's stomach was so full that she didn't feel like getting up. "It's not good for your stomach to eat so much in the middle of the night." Li Jinan poured her a cup of tea and said lightly. She glared at him and said, "If you weren't here, I wouldn't have been able to eat so much." Li Jinan looked a little surprised and nodded his head. With a look of satisfaction on his face, he said, "I never expected that I'd be a feast for the eyes." Yi Yuyu was speechless. She picked up her teacup and took a sip. For a moment she was speechless. "However, no matter how charming I am, you shouldn't eat so much," Li Jinan said sarcastically as he lit up a cigarette. "What can I do? I've already eaten it." Yi Yuyu was a little annoyed. Why was this man so shameless? If you gave him a pole he could fly straight into the sky? Li Jinan slowly puffed out a ring of smoke and calmly replied, "In that case I can only do some aerobic exercise to aid digestion." She coughed violently and spat out a mouthful of water. Almost at the same time, Li Jinan and Yi Yuyu looked over. Yi Qianqian blushed. She quickly wiped her face with a tissue and coughed lightly. Was she thinking wrongly? Doing aerobic exercise in the middle of the night? Yi Yuyu blushed when she saw Yi Qianqian's reaction. She stood up and said to Li Jinan bluntly, "You pay the bill. I'm going for a walk in the park." Li Jinan had no objections. He nodded slightly, stood up and walked out. After paying the bill, Li Jinan followed them as they strolled leisurely. He looked around and commented, "The environment isn't too bad, but the security needs to be strengthened. This place doesn't seem too safe. Why are there so many bad people?" "Enough is enough," Yi Yuyu said in exasperation as she quickened her pace. Yi Qianqian was surprised to hear Yi Yuyu's tone. From the very beginning, Yi Yuyu had been teasing him. If this had been in the past, Yi Yuyu would have held it in and not said a word. She would have told her in secret when she got home. This was a habit she had developed after being by Shenluo, Anne's side for several years. That night, Yi Yuyu had completely lost the shadow of the yes-man. It was as if she had returned to the time before Guan Kui had gotten into trouble. Yi Yuyu was a little stubborn and a little hot-tempered. Very real, very cute. When Yi Qianqian saw that, she gave Li Jinan a sidelong glance. Yi Qianqian stood behind them and said, "You, I just remembered that I still have a draft to review. I'll head back first. I have to work overtime. Why don't you take a walk with GM Li and digest your food?" As she spoke, she didn't wait for Yi Yuyu's reply. She turned around and waved her hand widely. Yi Yuyu was dumbfounded. Did Yi Qianqian just sell me off? "Sister." Yi Qianshan turned around with a smile and said, "It doesn't matter if you come back later. Let's have a good chat." It didn't matter if he didn't come back. Anyway, she would definitely lock the door tonight. GM Lee, whether you succeed or not depends on yourself. Chapter 1443. Yi Yuyu had been betrayed by her most trusted sister. She felt a little conflicted. She knew that Yi Qianshan was doing it for her own good. In all fairness, Li Jinan was indeed a very good man. Regardless of his background, personality, or looks, he was top-notch. It was precisely because of this that Yi Yuyu stopped in her tracks. The gap between them was too great. First of all, there was a huge problem between them. Her marriage. "Let's go." Li Jinan's voice was low and slow. It had an indescribable magnetism to it. Yi Yuyu let out a long sigh and walked with Li Jinan in silence. Soon they reached the Kingstown riverside. The wind at night was very cool. Beautiful lights were reflected on the surface of the river. At first glance it was a beautiful sight. But, just like the person beside her, it was unreachable. GM Lee, Yi Yuyu looked at the surface of the river. Her eyes were fixed on the surface of the lake. Calling me GM Lee is too distant. Li Jinan held a cigarette between his fingers. He gently flicked the ash off and said, "I don't like it. Change it." Yi Yuyu was silent. She looked at the sparks between his fingers and said, "I don't think we're compatible." Li Jinan chuckled. His cold gaze swept over her. Like the gentle breeze on the river, he said, "I think we're compatible." "We think?" Yi Yuyu paused for a moment before saying, "The gap between us is too big." Li Jinan didn't say anything. He shifted to the side and the distance between them was shortened. Yi Yuyu was speechless. She instinctively moved to the side, but her waist was held tightly. In an instant, the man beside her had already turned his head. His deep, dark eyes stared at her. His red lips curved into a half-smile as he said, "You don't have to worry about whether the gap between us is big or not. Leave Shenluo, and to me. No matter what, the two of you are only a fake couple. Sooner or later you'll have to separate." Li Jinan's grip was too tight, and the distance between them was shortened. Yi Yuyu could clearly feel the warmth of the man beside her and the smell of cigarette smoke. She frowned and pushed him away in resistance. However, Li Jinan's hand didn't budge. He said, "If you move again you won't be going home tonight." Yi Yuyu was stunned. Her face turned red with anger. She gritted her teeth and said, "Pervert." Li Jinan didn't look at her. Instead, he stared at the cigarette in his hand and said, "Isn't there a saying that women don't like bad men? A hooligan is a hooligan if you like it." "I don't love him." Yi Yuyu immediately retorted. "It doesn't matter." Li Jinan seemed to have expected it. He took a drag on his cigarette and said, "You will love her sooner or later." Yi Yuyu puffed up her cheeks and asked, "What's the point of you doing this?" "Some people are addicted to alcohol. Some people are addicted to smoking. Some people are addicted to drugs. Do you know why?" Li Jinan looked at her with his dark eyes. His eyes were as dark as the night, as if he wanted to suck her in. Yi Yuyu was stunned for a moment before replying, "It's because they're addicted." Li Jinan's eyes curved slightly and he nodded slightly. His gaze returned to the surface of the river as he continued, "Yeah. Because I'm addicted, I don't want to restrain myself. So I indulge myself." In an instant, Yi Yuyu understood what he meant. Because he was addicted, he didn't want to restrain himself, so he indulged. What a perfect sentence. It was indeed something that someone like him would say. Yi Yuyu pursed her lips slightly. For some reason, her heart was moved. Chapter 1444. The breeze from the river was cool. The reflection of the street was bright and sparkling on the surface of the river. Yi Yuyu looked at the side profile of the man beside her. His face was tense and determined. Something was changing in the depths of her heart. As if sensing Yi Yuyu's gaze, Li Jinan turned to look at her. His deep, dark eyes could clearly see the expression on Yi Yuyu's face. Her emotions began to change. His lips turned up. He tilted his head slightly and said, "Let's go." Yi Yuyu asked, "You don't want to go home?" Li Jinan put out his cigarette and asked with a half-smile, "Or do you want to get a room with me?" "No." Yi Yuyu objected immediately. The smile in Li Jinan's eyes deepened as he said, "Then let's get a room." "I said I don't want to get a room." Yi Yuyu gritted her teeth. Li Jinan didn't care. He put his hands in his pockets and turned to leave. Yi Yuyu followed behind and shouted, "I'm going home." "Yeah. You don't have to send me home. You should go back. It's getting late." My car is downstairs. The wedding date was on schedule. The house that when Fenglin had bought wasn't big. The group of friends and relatives had already filled up the house. Yu Lily was wearing her wedding gown. She was excited and nervous at the thought of seeing the man that she had been thinking about day and night. It was a kind of unknown future and a longing for the arrival of happiness. The groom is here. The groom is here. A childish voice called out. Everyone in the house couldn't help but love him. Li Jianyue was wearing a cute white dress and black leather shoes. She ran inside and said, Uncle O Ming is here. Brother Mosen, hold the door and don't let Uncle O Ming in. The little girl's sweet voice made everyone around laugh. Someone couldn't help but tease, how can we not let your Uncle O Ming in? Your Uncle O Ming still has to marry his wife. Exactly. Do you want your Uncle O Ming to not marry your Auntie Lily? Li Jianyue heard that and stood firm. She put her hands on her hips and said, Auntie Chanshan said that if Uncle O Ming isn't sincere, he can't marry his wife. Brother Mosen, am I right? The little boy, Li Mosen, who had been called out, nodded his head when he heard Li Jianyue's words. With a serious expression, he said, Yes, not only do you have to marry a wife, but you also have to be sincere in wooing a wife. This little fellow has awareness. Little comrade, you have a bright future. Whose child is this? He must be from Su Chinxi's family. So cute. This is a mixed race, a Prince Charming. The compliments around him made Li Mosen a little embarrassed. He blushed, but he did not retreat. He stood with Li Jianyue. This little flower boy looks so good standing there. Both boys and girls are cute. This girl looks so much like Su Chenxi and Li Xiqing. You can tell it's their child at a glance. As one of the bridesmaids, Yi Chanshan came forward to protect the two little flower girls and said, Don't scare our little angels. Hurry up and prepare your red packets. O Ming is here. We can't let him marry our little princess so easily. Yu Lily, who was surrounded, suddenly felt a burst of happiness in her heart. Chapter 1445. She just said that she went out to buy something. I think she'll be back soon. Give her a call, someone said. Hearing that, Yu Lily subconsciously thought of the conversation she had with Shin Manting a few days ago. For some reason she felt a little strange. When she heard what her friend said, she picked up her phone and dialed Shin Manting's number. However, Shin Manting's phone rang behind her. Yi Chanshan followed the ringtone and quickly took out a white phone. She waved the phone and said, The phone is here but she's not. Maybe she went out to relax, Yu Lily murmured as if to comfort herself. After a while she heard the doorbell ring. Oh, the groom and the groomsmen are here. Everyone get ready. Yi Chanshan put the matter at the back of her mind and quickly waved her hand. She led a group of colleagues and friends toward the door to hide. Yi Chanshan pushed Li Jianyue to the door, and the little girl immediately called out, Who is it? It was a young girl's voice, familiar and sweet. O Ming couldn't help but laugh and said, It's me. Who are you? I'm Uncle O Ming. Who are you today? Li Jianyue shouted according to the lines that Yi Chanshan had arranged for her. I'm the groom. I heard that the groom has to give a red packet. Where's Uncle O Ming's red packet? Open the door. Uncle will give you a red packet. All right, Li Jianyue shouted. Open the door. Yi Chanshan rubbed Li Jianyue's fluffy little head and praised, Great. Soon the door was opened and the group of bridesmaids inside all shouted, Who is it? The groomsmen behind him were all O Ming's friends. When they heard that, they all laughed and said, The groom is here to pick up the bride. Sincerity? The group of bridesmaids shouted. Then, O Ming quickly took out a stack of red packets and said, Sincerity? The group of bridesmaids shouted happily. Li Jianyue's small body also shouted and jumped up. Everyone was paying attention to the little cutie. O Ming stuffed all the red packets into the little girl's hands and said, Help Uncle give out red packets. Li Jianyue held a pile of red envelopes and shouted excitedly, Brother Mosen, red envelopes. The adults all laughed, but Yi Chanshan wasn't about to let O Ming in. She said, Where's your sincerity? Declare your love. Shout it out. The groomsman sighed and said, Why didn't you follow the rules? You should have opened the door after taking the red packet. Our young Master O doesn't know how to speak, but he still wants to declare his love. Ha ha ha. Master O, a declaration of love. He touched his nose and said, A declaration of love. Let me think about it. The scene was filled with cheers and hoots. One of Yi Chanshan's friends walked out with a microphone that had been prepared beforehand and said, Come, come, come. This is a declaration of love. Where's the applause? Cheers and whistles instantly rang out. They were all a group of young people and they were all very open. When they saw such a scene they all became excited. A microphone was stuffed into Oming's hand. There was a smile on his handsome face and a pair of beautiful peach blossom eyes. However, he couldn't see the figure that he hadn't seen for decades. You Lily. His deep and magnetic voice had a touch of evil that was exclusive to Oming. Chapter 1446. Especially when she heard that the cheers outside had quieted down, this feeling was even stronger. He stood up, opened the door a crack and peeked out. You Lily, Oming's voice came again and he called her name again. I'm here. A few simple words fell into you Lily's heart. Sweet happiness began to quickly ferment. Outside, there was a commotion, and the bridesmaids immediately began to dislike him. Isn't this a declaration of love? Why is it so simple? No, do it again. Oming really didn't know how to say those sweet words. Hearing the dislike around him, he helplessly scratched his ears and cheeks, thought for a moment and said, You Lily, I did a lot of things wrong in the past and I even hurt you again and again. Many times we broke up and got back together. Every time, although I didn't say it, I know you must be very sad. As Oming spoke, his face turned red, especially after seeing the eyes around him. He coughed a little unnaturally and said, But it doesn't matter. The sadness I caused you in the past, let me compensate you bit by bit in the future. We have a lifetime and in the future we will have children. I will continue my feelings for you to our next generation, and our future forever. Well said. The best men immediately clapped their hands and started to applaud. In the room, you Lily burst into laughter, but her eyes were inexplicably hot. There was a commotion outside, and you Lily immediately returned to the bed and sat down. Soon the room door was opened. The group of bridesmaids rushed in and surrounded you Lily in an instant. You Lily was wearing a wedding dress that Oming had carefully designed, exquisite and gorgeous. Oming looked at you Lily. The long separation had made the eyes of his beloved woman in front of him even more beautiful, and it made his heart beat even more. You Lily stood up, surrounded by people. Looking at the man in front of her, she had not seen for a long time, chuckled and said, The words you just said are really not suitable for you. Oming walked forward, stared at her and slowly said, I will do it. You Lily's lips curved and her laughter was light. Like a bird, she flew forward and landed firmly in his arms. Yi Chanshan was secretly envious. Suddenly the cell phone in her handbag rang again. It was Shin Manting's cell phone. Yi Chanshan walked to a corner and picked up her cell phone. She immediately saw the caller. Shin Luo. The relationship between Shin Manting and Shin Luo had long been an open secret. Yi Chanshan's messages were never restricted. When she saw the number she ignored it and put it back. Yi Chanshan searched the entire area, but she couldn't find any trace of Shin Manting. However, Shin Luo made no less than 5 calls in a row. Ding dong, she received a text message from Shin Luo. Where are you? If you don't tell me, I'll go to Oming's wedding to find you. Yi Chanshan sneered when she read the news. This fellow, it seemed like he was born to be a rotten person. Not only did he treat Yi Yuyu this way, but he also treated Shin Manting this way? Rotten. Rotten to the core. Following that, Shin Luo called her again. Yi Chanshan quickly answered the call and angrily said, Shin Manting has gone out. I didn't bring my phone. When he heard Yi Chanshan's voice, he seemed to be a little angry. Where did she go? Chapter 1447. When Yi Chanshan heard Shin Luo's words, she became even angrier. She opened her mouth and scolded, Are you crazy? She is your sister and your lover. Everyone knows the relationship between you and Yi Yuyu. She is your wife, but you are taking care of a childhood friend who has nothing to do with you. How can you ask where Shin Manting is now? You ask me, how do I know? When I found this phone, she had already disappeared. Shouldn't you ask yourself this question? Yi Chanshan's voice was not low, and she spoke quickly like a machine gun. Shin Luo became even more angry and said in a deep voice, Don't play tricks on me. Ask Shin Manting to answer the phone. Yi Chanshan sneered. You still want to play tricks? Do you think you are a wreath? I'm not your dog. Goodbye. After that he hung up the phone. Yi Chanshan hung up the phone and felt happy. She turned on Shin Manting's phone and blocked Shin Luo's phone number. Shin Manting deliberately came to Kingstown to be Yu Lily's bridesmaid. She probably wanted to get rid of Shin Luo's shackles. In this case she had done a good deed. Yi Chanshan closed the page. However, at a glance she saw a few big words written on the screen of Shin Manting's phone. "If you see my phone, please help me open the notebook." It was a white page with black words. The words were large and clear at a glance. Yi Qianqian was stunned. Looking at the phone, she suddenly felt at a loss. Is this just a desktop or some kind of message? How did she know that someone would touch her phone? Yi Qianqian was curious, but she quickly realized that Shin Manting's phone did not have a password set. Nowadays, every normal person's phone must have a password set or a wrinkle to unlock it, but Shin Manting's phone could be unlocked with a light swipe, and there was very little software. Yi Qianqian opened the notebook suspiciously. When she clicked on it, she saw a text file that was filled with densely packed words. It read, "I am Shin Manting. Although I don't know who you are, if you see this notebook, thank you for paying attention to me. Please pass my cell phone to Shin Luo, and let him open my favorite box. Thank you. On the right-hand side of my bed, there is a crystal bottle. Inside the bottle is my gift of thanks to you. Thank you for helping me pass the message. Thank you for paying attention to me." There weren't many words, but every single one of them was filled with a sense of farewell. Yi Qianqian was shocked. She opened the other apps on her phone and found that all her social media accounts and contact data had been cleared. All that was left was Shin Luo on. In other words, Shin Manting had long been prepared for this decision. Yi Qianqian flipped through it and found an encrypted document in one of the programs. There was an encrypted file in the document. Yi Qianqian tried to open it, but she needed to enter the password. Come to think of it, this must be her willingness to hand over the phone to Shin Luo, and right? Yi Qianqian felt a little regretful. She quickly closed the web page and removed Shin Luo's number from the blacklist. She dialed his number. Chapter 1448. When Yi Qianqian heard his words, she knew that he must have found out about Shin Manting's departure. After a moment of silence, Yi Qianqian actually felt a little sad. He asked again, "Did she say anything to you before she left?" Yi Qianqian thought about it and sighed. She said, "I don't know. I'm not close to Shin Manting, but I'm sure she's no longer in Kingstown. If you look for her, you might be able to find her." Shin Luo suddenly felt a little flustered when he heard this. This was a feeling he had never felt before. It was just like the physiological reaction he had when he approached Shin Manting. It was as if he had encountered a magnet. This feeling was sudden and inexplicable. Shin Luo felt an inexplicable sense of irritation. He couldn't help but sneer and say, "Why should I look for her?" Yi Qianqian's sadness suddenly turned into anger. She was so angry that she yelled, "Go to hell!" She hung up the phone and stomped her feet in anger. Scum. Bastard. Disgusting man. Useless man. Transplanting machine man. But after hanging up, she remembered that she was supposed to give the phone to Shin Luo. But she didn't want to give it to him anymore. What a slut. "Qianqian, where did you go?" someone shouted from afar. Yi Qianqian immediately replied, "Coming." Today was the wedding day of Ming and Yu Lily. They couldn't be too anxious. They had to be happy. Yi Qianqian adjusted her emotions and let out a long sigh before walking out. Ming had already helped the bride into the wedding car, and the scene was filled with cheers. Yi Qianqian placed her cell phone in her handbag before following him. Shin Manting's sudden departure was hard for him to accept. Sitting on Shin Manting's bed, Shin Luo stared blankly at the door, as if a tall and voluptuous figure was standing there. Shin Manting left? Therefore, going to Kingstown to be Yu Lily's bridesmaid was just an excuse. That woman only wanted to escape from him, that was all. With this realization, Shin Luo suddenly felt a little ridiculous. Escape from him? What right does Shin Manting have to do that? What she had, what she wanted, and what she got were all given by the Shin family. Why should she escape? After enjoying everything he wanted, he just left, right? How could there be such a thing in the world? Shin Luo abruptly stood up from the bed, picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Help me find someone." The person on the other side had never heard Shin Luo speak so angrily and anxiously. He was stunned for a moment and immediately asked, "Who is it?" "My woman, Shin Manting." The surrounding scenery flashed past quickly, and the fuselage shook violently because it was moving. When the sound of something slicing through the air rang out, everything in the surroundings seemed to have gradually become distant. Her field of vision was getting higher and higher, and the ground was getting farther and farther away. When she finally saw the layers of white clouds, her heart, which had been tense all this while, suddenly relaxed. However, Perhaps it was because she had been in a highly tense state of mind all of a sudden that her heart began to tremble. Inexplicably, her eyes began to sting, and a warm current welled up in her eyes. For a moment she couldn't hold back her tears. She let out a low whimper, and big drops of tears rolled down her cheeks and fell into the plush toy in her arms. Chapter 1449. In the Holy Church, Jesus was nailed to the center of the cross. The priest stood in the center and announced the wedding of the couple. The atmosphere was getting better and better and everyone was beaming. But Yi Qianshan had something else hidden in her heart. "Qianshan, what are you thinking about? Lily is going to throw the bouquet." A colleague nudged Yi Qianshan, who was in a daze, and reminded her. Yi Qianshan snapped back to her senses and saw Yu Lily's blissfully slender back. At that moment Yu Lily's back was facing them. She shouted, "1, 2, 3. Catch it." Just as Yu Lily's voice fell, the girls began to shout and collectively snatched the bouquet. Since they were attending the wedding, they had to participate in the bouquet throwing activities. It was said that the person who got the bouquet would be the next to get married. Regardless of whether the rumor was true or not, everyone was just doing it for fun. But, after all the hustle and bustle, the bouquet ended up in the hands of a person who had been standing at the back the entire time. Everyone looked at the person. Yu looked at the bouquet in her hand in a daze. She looked around and seemed a little embarrassed. She said, Ever since Yu had arrived, no one had paid much attention to her. Now that she had suddenly become the owner of the bouquet, many people looked over. Many people's eyes lit up when they saw her. They began to whisper, "Who is that? She's so pretty. She looks so much like Yi Qianshan. She must be Yi Qianshan's younger sister. But she's much prettier than Yi Qianshan. Hey, she looks a little familiar. Is she some celebrity?" Li Jinan stood in the crowd and immediately noticed the shy Yu. The corners of his mouth turned up slightly. He found her adorable. Su Qinxi was leading the two children. When she saw Li Jinan's subtle but genuine expression, she immediately understood what he meant. She nudged him mischievously and teased, "Have you taken a fancy to her?" Li Jinan glanced at Su Qinxi. On that familiar face was a smile that he was very familiar with. He didn't nod or shake his head, but the smile on his lips deepened. Su Qinxi understood at a glance and said, "This girl is really good. She's pretty and has a good personality. But I heard that she's married." The married person received the bouquet. Did this mean that they were married again? Su Qinxi had this thought in her mind and was immediately startled. She wouldn't marry her second uncle, would she? How could he do that? His rational mind told him that he shouldn't be superstitious and that he should just play around with things. However, Su Qinxi was reborn. For such things she would rather believe them than not believe them. The smile on Li Jinan's face faded a little. Without a word, he walked in the direction of Yu. Seeing this, Su Qinxi's heart skipped a beat and she thought, "It's over. Uncle is really interested in Yi Qianshan's younger sister. What should I do?" Su Qinxi subconsciously looked at Yu and accidentally found that Yu seemed to be looking at her. For a moment she was embarrassed. Smiling politely, she quickly turned her head. Yu retracted her gaze, feeling a sense of loneliness in her heart. Chapter 1450. That's fine. In any case, I probably won't be with him anymore. The distance between us is too great. Li Jinan walked through the crowd toward Yu. By the time he arrived, most of the people had already dispersed. Yu and Yi Qianshan were standing together talking. When she saw Li Jinan walk over, Yi Qianshan took a step back and said, "Yu, I'm going to use the restroom. Remember to come to the hotel for dinner later." Li Jinan was very pleased with Yi Qianshan's tactfulness and gave her a look of approval. Yu held the bouquet in her hands and felt a little uneasy. She lowered her head and was about to walk away when she was blocked. Li Jinan stopped her with one long arm. With his long fingers, he took the bouquet she was holding and said in a low voice, "Congratulations. You're next." Li Jinan smelled of tobacco. It wasn't strong, but it smelled good. When Yu heard Li Jinan's obvious words, she felt a little repulsed. He had just been standing and talking with the woman he liked. His gaze was so gentle and he looked so lovey-dovey. The next moment he was openly seducing a married woman. Do men like that all like to play with people like that? Yu looked up at him and said, "Jian Li, you must be joking. You know that I'm already married." "Who said you can't get married a second time?" Li Jinan said matter-of-factly. "I'll give you a second time." Yu's heart skipped a beat. She looked up and around her. She realized that there were still people looking at her. Her heart was in her throat. This feeling was no different from having an affair. Luckily, Li Jinan's voice was very soft. Otherwise, she would have been even more embarrassed. Yi Yu lowered her head and quickly said, "Since you like this bouquet, I'll let you have it. Goodbye." With that, Yi Yu immediately turned around and left. Li Jinan held the bouquet of white roses in his hands. His heart was filled with surprise and surprise. It was a very strange feeling. Looking at the flowers, he smiled and muttered to himself, "This is the first time a woman has given me flowers. Why is she so careless?" When he said that, even Li Jinan laughed. He looked in the direction that Yi Yu had fled in with a gentle gaze. The direction and goal in his heart became clearer and clearer. If he wanted her, it would be her. Yi Yu could clearly feel Li Jinan's threatening gaze behind her. She cautiously walked all the way to the bathroom. When she felt that no one was looking at her, she quietly breathed a sigh of relief. He splashed his face with water, and then he heard voices coming from inside. His voice wasn't loud, so Yi Yu couldn't hear him clearly. He could vaguely tell that it was Yi Chanshan's voice. He walked in and knocked on the door. "Sis, are you here?" When Yi Chanshan heard Yi Yu's voice, she immediately paused and replied, "It's me." Yi Yu walked in. Yi Chanshan was talking on the phone with an unhappy expression on her face. "What's wrong?" Yi Yu asked. Yi Chanshan waved her hand and motioned for her to keep quiet. Then she said in an extremely unfriendly tone, "It's up to you whether you believe me or not. I really don't know. I just picked up her cell phone. Besides, what does Shin Manting's escape have to do with me? *CK, don't force me to swear. I will send the phone to you. Just give me an address. As for the rest, it's none of my business." These words contained a lot of information. Chapter 1451. Yi Chanshan turned and saw Yi Yu's expression. She felt a little awkward and said, "Yi Yu, wait a minute." Shen Luo, and was silent on the other end. He had always had special feelings for Yi Yu. She was his wife and his childhood sweetheart. But, when Yi Yu heard Yi Chanshan's confession, she leaned forward curiously. Yi Chanshan hung up the phone. Yi Yu didn't hear anything. "What are you talking about? What do you mean by Shin Manting ran away?" Yi Yu had a bad feeling in her heart. She looked at Yi Chanshan's guilty eyes and asked in a questioning tone, "How did you know?" As she spoke, her eyes fell on Yi Chanshan's hand. "This phone belongs to Shin Manting, doesn't it?" Yi Chanshan was getting impatient. "Can you stop asking? It's not a good thing for you anyway." "What do you mean?" I'm not sure what happened, but didn't Shin Manting say she was going to be Lily's bridesmaid today?" Yi Yu nodded. Yi Chanshan continued, "Actually, it was just a ruse. Shin Manting left her cell phone here and waited for us to find it. After leaving a message, we don't know where she went. I'm guessing that she's already gone. But Shin Luo, and is like *King psychopath. He keeps calling and pressing for answers." Yi Chanshan clenched her teeth in anger and said, "But it's best if Shin Luo and finds that woman. Otherwise, he'll definitely pester you in the future." Shin Manting also diverted his attention. "If Shin Manting really runs away from home and doesn't come back, then?" Yi Chanshan was terrified. "Absolutely not. You must get a divorce. This kind of man is unacceptable." Yi Yu was silent when she heard that. Shin Manting really left? It wasn't that Yi Yu didn't know about the relationship between Shin Luo and her. She just didn't know how they interacted. When she saw this result, she naturally knew it wasn't good. She pursed her lips and said, "Don't be afraid, older sister. Even if Shin Manting is gone, there's still Guan Kui. We've been separated for more than a year since our marriage. In a few more months, we'll be able to file for divorce." When Yi Chanshan heard that, a look of shock and disbelief appeared on her face. She exclaimed, "Oh my God! You've finally come around. Oh my God!" What followed was astonishing excitement. Yi Chanshan suddenly jumped up and laughed out loud. She immediately hugged Yi Yu and shouted, "That's great! That's great! You must hold on to Li Jinan. Compared to that perverted scumbag, he is the best of the best." Yi Chanshan's exaggerated expression and tone made Yi Yu feel guilty. He immediately pushed her down and covered her mouth. "Keep your voice down. What if someone hears you?" When Yi Chanshan heard that, she got even more excited. She put her arm around Yi Chanshan's shoulder and asked, "How's your relationship with Li Jinan now? Oh my, why did you come back so early the night before yesterday? You should have stayed a little longer to cultivate your relationship. Don't mess around." Yi Yu looked at her reproachfully. "Between him and me, I don't think it's possible." Chapter 1452. Yi Qianshan didn't know about Yi Yuyu's concerns. She patted Yi Yuyu's shoulder excitedly and rebuked her. It's not that far away. As long as you get a divorce, everything will go smoothly. GM Li is very interested in you. Yi Yuyu didn't want to continue the conversation. She pushed Yi Yuyu away and said, "Let's go. There are many people here. It'll be awkward if someone hears us." Yi Qianshan's mood brightened immediately. She nodded her head and led Yi Yuyu out. Many people had already gone to the hotel. After Yi Qianshan and Yi Yuyu walked out, the crowd around them had lessened. Just as they walked out, they saw a black car parked outside. The car was a beautiful mirror, and the reflection of the two of them was reflected in it. In an instant, the car window was lowered, revealing the face of the person inside. Yi Yuyu and Yi Qianshan thought of the same person at the same time, Li Jinan. But when the car window was lowered, they saw another face. His face was handsome and resolute. It was very pleasing to the eye. However, when compared to Li Jinan's, it was a far cry from his looks. Yi Yuyu and Yi Qianshan were a little disappointed. The man said, "Miss Yi, third young master asked me to pick you up." That one sentence pulled back all the disappointment in his heart. They naturally knew who third young master was referring to. The two of them quickly got into the car. Yi Qianshan looked a little happy and said, "There are too many people here. Third young master is so considerate." Yi Yuyu pursed her lips and didn't say a word. The hotel wasn't far and there were many guests coming and going. It was very lively. Yu Lily changed her clothes and changed her makeup in the bridal room. She was so tired that she was about to collapse. The dress for the toast was a long red cheongsam. She had to wear a pair of very high heels. Usually this was no trouble for Yu Lily. But today it was a little difficult for Yu Lily. When she stepped out of the door in her high heels, she almost fell. The assistant beside her was quick to react and immediately supported her. Yu Lily was still in shock. Before she could breathe a sigh of relief, she heard familiar footsteps. Ming was extraordinarily handsome that day. He was wearing a black silk Chinese tunic suit with dark patterns and a jazz hat on his head. When he walked over, a pair of bright, almond-shaped eyes looked over, and he walked a little faster to take Yu Lily. Feeling the familiar aura, Yu Lily's heart calmed down. "You go ahead with your work," Ming said to his assistant. The assistant quickly left. Ming held Yu Lily up and asked with a frown, "What's wrong? Too tired?" "Well." Yu Lily stood up straight and looked up at him. Her eyes were sparkling. She smiled sweetly and said, "Come in." With that, she pulled him back into the bride's room. Her footsteps were a little hurried and she couldn't wait any longer. Ming, who was watching from behind, was shocked. He put his hand behind her. As soon as they entered, Yu Lily closed the door, but before she had time to lock it, she was taken by a strong and powerful hand. Yu Lily was caught off guard and bumped into a strong chest. In a moment, she clearly felt a strong heartbeat in front of her and a burning gaze. Chapter 1453. The assistant stood outside for a few minutes, guessing that something unspeakable was going on inside. She took a look and saw that 5 minutes had passed before she knocked on the door again. But this time the door opened quickly. The assistant was surprised. So fast? The person who opened the door was Ming. Ming's black Chinese tunic suit was still the same. It was very neat and tidy without the slightest hint of disarray. It gave off a sense of propriety and respectability. The assistant was even more surprised when she saw it. Could it be that she was wrong? Ming looked at the assistant and said, "Help her touch up her makeup." With that, he walked away. When the assistant walked in, Yu Lily's face was abnormally red. The lipstick on her lips had been smeared on her makeup. Yu Lily was in the middle of putting on makeup in front of the mirror. When she saw the assistant come over, she put down the cotton pad and said, "You're more professional. You do it." The assistant touched up Yu Lily's makeup and quickly took her out. Yu Lily toasted along the way. There were many friends of Qiao Ziqing and Huajin as well as various relatives. Yu Lily's legs felt like they were about to break. Ming supported her along the way. Their bodies were pressed against each other and there was no gap in their warmth. That kind of distance made the two people who hadn't seen each other in a long time even more restless. The torment was too torturous. After Ming calmed down a few times, he finally drank some wine with his buddies. By the time it was over, it was already very late. Yu Lily sat alone in the bride's room, waiting for Ming to finish. But as she waited, she quickly fell asleep. In her dreams, she felt like her body was floating like a boat. She floated on and on until she finally reached the side of a warm lake. She opened her eyes tiredly and found her surroundings dark. Oming was beside her. When he sensed that she had woken up, he asked, "You're awake?" Yulili got up and looked out the window. She yawned. "We're not home yet? I'm so tired." So, Oming reached out and took her hand. When he saw the beautiful and exquisite diamond ring on her finger, he smiled in satisfaction and said, "If you're tired, sleep a little longer. I'll carry you back later." Yulili leaned on his shoulder and glanced at the driver who was driving. Then she quickly kissed him on the cheek. There was a big red mark on Oming's face which looked sexy and funny. The driver in front glanced back through the rearview mirror, but he didn't dare to look too much. He immediately turned his eyes away. Oming's expression was the same as usual. It was as if he didn't feel anything. His lips still had a faint and evil smile. However, the hand that was holding her tightened slightly. His well-defined fingers shuttled back and forth between her fingers, and the speed was getting faster and faster. Yulili didn't react at first, but soon she felt her face burning. She clamped his hand hard and looked at the driver in front. When she found that he wasn't looking at her, she quietly breathed a sigh of relief. However, Oming seemed to have done it on purpose. He asked, "Why are you clamping it so tightly?" Hearing this, the driver immediately looked over with curiosity and surprise in his eyes. Yulili's face was burning hot as she exclaimed, "What the hell?" Chapter 1454. Chao Ziqing was right. She had to be prepared at all times. But could she really have it just like that? Yulili felt a little guilty. When she saw Chao Ziqing's expectant gaze, she felt even more guilty. Did Oming's mother know that she had an abortion? If she didn't, would she be angry when she found out now? Yulili was in a daze. Suddenly, someone nudged her. When Fenglin looked at her and asked, "What are you thinking about? Why are you so engrossed?" Yulili shook her head and replied, "Daddy, have you eaten? Are you hungry?" "I've had lunch. I'm not hungry now." When Fenglin smiled happily. The two dimples on his lips were very deep. He looked at her and asked, "Would you like to cook for me?" Yulili giggled and hooked her arm around Wen Fenglin's and asked, "What would you like to eat, Daddy? I'll make it for you." "What about me?" Oming didn't back down. He walked over and said, "Hubby would like to eat sweet and sour pork ribs." When Fenglin smiled. Looking at the happy couple, he felt extremely comforted. Yulili and Nanny Zhang went to buy some groceries and quickly started cooking at home. It had to be said that Yulili's culinary skills were excellent. Not only did she look and smell great, but she also took care of everyone's taste buds. After the meal, everyone was in a good mood. After the meal, Yulili sat on the sofa and dozed off. "Little pig, go to sleep after you're full." Oming sat beside her and put his arm around her shoulder so that she could lean on his shoulder. "Are you that tired? Let's go home early tonight. I won't torture you any longer." When Yulili heard that, her eyes flew open and she looked around. When she realized that there was no one around, she let out a sigh of relief. She turned her head and slapped Oming's hand. "You're going to die. You said it so loudly. It'll be so embarrassing if someone hears you." Oming felt a little innocent and replied, "We're husband and wife. Isn't it normal to torture each other? Mom and Dad are both experienced people. No one will laugh at you." Yulili was a little unhappy and turned her head away in a huff. But her body still leaned on Oming's. She felt tired and said, "I'm tired. Let's go back." "Well, let's go." Oming pulled her up, said goodbye to the elders and drove home. When she got home, Yulili didn't even want to take a shower. She just went straight to bed. Yulili's nap was incredible. He fell into bed around 8 in the evening and woke up around 9 in the morning. Yulili's head was heavy and her feet were light. When she got up, she felt her throat was very empty. She went to the bathroom to rinse her mouth, but as soon as the water entered her mouth, Yulili felt her mouth was bitter. All of a sudden, Yulili felt a wave of nausea in her throat, and she retched into the basin. The door to the bathroom wasn't closed. When Oming came back from his morning jog, he heard Yulili retching. He walked in with a frown and gently patted her back, asking in a low voice, "What's wrong?" "I slept for too long. I feel terrible." Yulili squeezed some toothpaste out of her mouth. "I'm fine now. I'll brush my teeth." Oming looked at her face. It was frighteningly pale. He reached out to touch her forehead and asked, "You look terrible. Where are you feeling uncomfortable?" "Oh." Yulili held a mouthful of water in her mouth. As she brushed her teeth, she mumbled, "I slept for too long. I feel dizzy. I'm fine. You can go out." Chapter 1455. When Ming saw this, he felt that things weren't that simple. He reached out and patted her back. Are you feeling unwell from hunger? You slept for more than 10 hours. Lily retched, but nothing came out. She waved her hand and said, I'm fine. I'll brush my teeth first. In the time it took to brush her teeth, Lily vomited twice. Again, nothing came out, but her body felt even more uncomfortable. After rinsing her mouth, Lily felt like she was about to collapse. She stumbled back to the bed and lay on her stomach. Ming picked her up and walked out without saying a word. Lily was about to vomit from the shaking. She groaned in discomfort and impatiently complained, What are you doing? I'm going to vomit. It's uncomfortable. I'll take you to the hospital for a checkup. You've never been like this before. You must be sick. You don't have a fever. Maybe you're dehydrated from sleeping for too long and have a heat stroke. Lily gave up struggling. She lay on his body and lazily enjoyed the service of a human car. When they got into the car, Lily leaned against the seat in a daze. She looked at the scenery along the road and didn't say a word. She didn't even want to move a finger. When they arrived at the hospital, Lily was still weak. Ming had to carry her in. There were many people in the hospital. Ming had acquaintances in the hospital, so he didn't have to wait in line to get checked. Lily didn't have a fever. Her body temperature was a little low. Her face was pale and her limbs were weak. She was nauseous and retching. The old doctor looked at Lily's condition again. After asking a few questions, he took off his glasses and placed them on the table. Go to the obstetrics and gynecology department for a blood test. Obstetrics and gynecology department? When they heard that word, Ming and Lily were stunned. They thought they had heard wrong. Doctor, did you just say, obstetrics and gynecology department? Ming found it hard to believe, but the smile on his lips continued to spread. Soon it spread all over his face. He said, You mean my wife is pregnant? Is that true? Ming's voice was a little loud. It sounded a little intimidating in the office. The old doctor picked his ear in disgust and said, How would I know? We'll only know after a checkup. Go and check. I can't guarantee that there's a child. Ha ha. Ming almost jumped up. He took Lily's hand and said, Let's go and see the gynecology department. Lily was still in a daze. She hadn't recovered from the shock when she heard the words. Being pulled by Ming, she lost her balance and leaned to the side. It wasn't much, and Lily managed to stabilize herself in an instant. In an instant, Ming held her in his arms and protected her like she was a treasure. Seeing that she was safe and sound, he said, Be careful. Take care of the child. Lily was shocked. The old doctor was even more disgusted. She tossed Lily's medical records aside and said, I didn't say that I'm definitely pregnant. Don't be too happy. Go, go, go. Hurry up and register for the obstetrics and gynecology department. Ming quickly nodded his head and pulled Lily up. As they walked, he placed his hands on either side of Lily and stared at her stomach as he said, Be careful, be careful. Chapter 1456. Lily's slightly lonely expression made Ming's heart ache. He placed his warm palm on her shoulder and said softly, No, you can be pregnant. Didn't the doctor say that there is a possibility that you are already pregnant? You have to believe the doctor. Let's go. We'll know after a checkup. Lily's heart felt a little uneasy, and she was always a little timid. But her desire for a child was very strong. After thinking about it again and again, Lily followed Ming to the obstetrics and gynecology department. After a series of examinations and inquiries, the senior female doctor pushed up her glasses and said, You are pregnant. Lily was stunned by the few words that were spoken so casually. Ming acted as if he had won a prize. He laughed loudly and said, Really? Ming's reaction was too exaggerated. The doctor was already used to it. She nodded and continued to ask, How long has it been since your period came? Great. That was great. You are really pregnant. Ming hugged Lily excitedly and shouted, Lily, did you hear that? Pregnant. Pregnant. Lily still couldn't believe it and said, Didn't they say that it is difficult for me to get pregnant? My uterus is cold. If you have a cold uterus, you need to pay more attention. It is more difficult to get pregnant, but it is not impossible. You need to be careful when you exercise. It is not easy to protect the fetus with a cold uterus. The doctor lowered her head to write and said, When was the last time you had a period? More than a month ago. About 5-6 weeks. It has been so long. Didn't you notice it? The doctor looked at her and asked, "My period is a bit messy. Sometimes it is less than a month. Sometimes it is 2 months, 3 months." The doctor frowned and said, "You can't be like this. How can you not take care of it? When did you start to feel uncomfortable?" "A few days ago. I am very tired and sleepy every day and I can't eat, especially at our wedding a few days ago." "You just had your wedding a few days ago? Don't be too tired. I saw that you had an abortion before and it was twins, right? A cold womb is probably the after effect of having an abortion. You didn't recuperate well during your confinement period, so your body is left with a lingering illness." The doctor asked meaningfully, "Do you have sexual intercourse frequently?" Ahem. Lily was a little embarrassed. "Apart from my period, I have it every day." When the doctor heard that, she took a deep look at Ming and said, "Young man, you're in good health. But next, you'll have to control yourself when you're pregnant. From your reaction, you're still in the early stages of pregnancy. Now is the most dangerous time. Don't do strenuous exercise. It's not good for the baby and the pregnant woman will also feel uncomfortable." Yes. Ming's eyes narrowed as he smiled. "I definitely won't. I'll prescribe you some health supplements to supplement your calcium. Go and have a checkup. You can go back when you're done." The doctor returned the medical record to Lily. Ming quickly picked up the medical records and carefully protected Lily as they walked. Be careful. The doctor found it funny, but at the same time, there was envy in his eyes. He shouted, "Zhao Hong." After Lily was done with the examination, Ming was grinning from ear to ear the whole time. Chapter 1457. Ming smiled even more foolishly. He touched his head and said, "I'm going to be a father. Our children are back." Hearing that, Lily smiled and reached out to touch her lower abdomen. She felt a little magical. She thought she would never be a mother in her life. She didn't expect it to be so soon. This child came more suddenly than she had imagined. That's great. God didn't deprive me of my right to be a mother. God is still kind. Ming saw her little movement and stopped. He gently held her in his arms and whispered, "Don't think too much. In the future, I will be the father and you will be the mother. These 5 children will definitely be born smoothly and healthily." Lily was amused by Ming's words. She reached out and patted him. "What do you think I am? 5 children?" Ming laughed and hugged her. He kissed her on the cheek and said, "Let's go back, mother of the children." "Well, yes, father of the children." As they went back and forth, their faces were filled with smiles. As soon as Ming got in the car, he called Xiao Ziqing. It was already afternoon and Xiao Ziqing seemed to be working out. When she received Ming's call, she was a little out of breath and said, "Hello. If you have something to say it quickly. I'm very busy." Ming smiled and said as he drove, "Mom, I want to tell you something very happy. Do you want to guess?" "What is it? Just say it." "I don't have time to guess." Xiao Ziqing was a little impatient. She was running and panting. "Hey, why is your temper getting worse? Are you going through menopause? Get lost. If there's nothing else, I'm hanging up." "Mom, you're going to be a grandmother." Ming's words were a little sudden and Xiao Ziqing was stunned. She immediately pressed the stop button on the treadmill and asked incredulously, "What did you just say?" "You're going to be a grandmother, I'm going to be a father, and Lily is going to be a mother. Our little baby is going to be born." Xiao Ziqing laughed and said, "So fast. You're too amazing. I thought it would be difficult for Lily to get pregnant. I was already mentally prepared with your father, but you did this to me." Ming had turned on the car phone and put it on speaker. When the couple heard this, they were both stunned. "Mom, how did you know?" Xiao Ziqing was in a good mood. She snorted and said, "Do you think Mommy doesn't know anything? Let me tell you, I know everything. Do you think you'll be fine just by hiding it from me? I will investigate it myself." In other words, Xiao Ziqing knew about this a long time ago, but she didn't use it to cause trouble for her. That meant that he had completely accepted Lily, right? Realizing this, Lily suddenly felt a little happy. An indescribable emotion rushed up from the bottom of his heart. Tears welled up in her eyes as she sobbed, "Mom?" Suddenly hearing Lily's voice, Xiao Ziqing was silent. He stopped the car on the side of the road and comforted her. "Why are you crying? Don't cry, don't cry. Be good and take good care of the child. I owe my wife, don't cry." Chapter 1458. Silly child. Xiao Ziqing's voice contained a hint of laughter. What's the use of blaming you? You're still my only daughter-in-law. Hearing this, Yu Lily sobbed even harder and burst into tears. Ming was at a loss. For a moment he didn't know whether to hug her or hold her. He frantically wiped her tears and said, "Don't cry, don't cry." On the other end of the line, Xiao Ziqing laughed and said, "My silly son, during pregnancy your emotions fluctuate greatly. It's normal to cry and laugh. Why are you acting like the idiot next door?" When she heard Xiao Ziqing's mocking words, Yu Lily's sobbing stopped and she burst out laughing. This made Ming's cheeks turn red. He said, "Mom, my wife is still here. How can you say that?" On the other end of the line, Xiao Ziqing laughed even more happily and said, "Do you have times when you're shy? Alright, I'm not talking to you anymore. I'm going to coax my wife." Ming hung up the phone and took a tissue to wipe her tears. But he found that Yu Lily's body was trembling slightly. He lifted her face and saw a big smile on her tear-stained face. Ming was speechless. This pregnant woman's emotions fluctuated greatly. One moment she was crying, the next moment she was laughing. But seeing her smile, Ming relaxed a lot. He smiled bitterly and said, "You're going to make me crazy." Yu Lily laughed out loud and said, "Idiot next door, ha." Ming was speechless. Resigned to his fate, Ming quickly drove back to the villa. As he drove he made phone calls. Along the way, Ming informed all his good friends. The first thing he called was Li Xiqing. The first thing he said was, "Second brother, I'm going to be a father." Li Xiqing replied, "Oh, I've been a father for a long time." "No, mine is different from yours," Ming said. "How is it different?" "I'm the father of a pair of twins. You only have one child, right?" "No, it's my first time being a father. I just found out today. Shouldn't you congratulate me?" Li Xiqing was accompanying his wife for a prenatal checkup. Looking at Su Qianxi in the ultrasound room, he smiled and said, "Congratulations, but I'm going to be a father for the second time. You should congratulate me too." Ming. "I can't continue this conversation." He hung up the phone and called Luo Zhan. Luo Zhan was typing on the keyboard in the company. Lines of code jumped out, and the psychological sense of achievement was also surging. The phone rang. It was Ming. Before Luo Zhan could say, "Hello," he heard Ming shout, "Luo Zhan, I'm going to be a father." Luo Zhan's hand on the keyboard trembled, and all the code on the computer was gone. His first reaction was to shout, "F***CK." He laughed out loud and said, "My wife is pregnant. I'm finally going to be a father. Look at you, you're already 32 years old. Why don't you go find a partner and have fun?" Luo Zhan silently restored the data and said, "Didn't you just get married yesterday? Don't you usually get pregnant after half a year? Why don't you follow the rules? This is too much." Chapter 1459. Luo Zhan was speechless. "I can't continue the conversation." Hearing the sound of the phone being hung up, Ming suddenly felt a sense of satisfaction. Following that, he made a lot of calls to his other friends. Ming was extremely happy. When he got home, Yu Lily couldn't take it anymore. She collapsed onto the bed and fell asleep. Ming hugged her and slept in his clothes. His lips curled up and he was in a good mood. She slept for the whole day. Yu Lily's head was spinning. When she woke up, Ming was no longer by her side. "Ming." Yu Lily called his name, but there was no response. She put on her slippers and opened the bedroom door. She heard a light noise outside. She walked downstairs and saw Ming busy in the kitchen. He was very busy. When she got closer, Yu Lily was surprised. She burst out laughing and asked, "You're actually cooking?" When Ming heard that, he was caught off guard. His hands were scalded. He immediately pinched his ears and laughed. "I'm making soup. It's very simple. After it's done, I just need to add salt." "Did you add salt?" "Not yet. I'm afraid I'll add too much. You know better than me. Come over and add salt." Ming waved his hand. He put down the spoon in his hand and picked up the salt jar. Yu Lily walked over slowly. After washing her hands, she added seasoning to the soup. "Do you have parsley?" "No." Ming suddenly realized and said, "No wonder I always felt that something was missing when I bought the ingredients. It was the parsley. I'll go buy it." "No need. I'll drink it all the same." Yu Lily scooped some into a bowl and tasted it. She was a little surprised and said, "It's quite fragrant. You should try it too." "Really?" Ming suddenly felt that he was amazing. "It's my first time making soup." As he said that, he took a sip and frowned. "Are you serious?" There was only the taste of water. The ingredients hadn't even been boiled yet. It tasted terrible. Yu Lily saw his expression and said, "It's quite delicious. It's much better than the first time I made soup." "Really?" "Sure enough, I'm talented in everything I do. When I become a father in the future, I'll definitely be a good father." As he said this, he laughed foolishly and said, "Do you think it will be 5 boys or 5 girls?" Yu Lily almost choked. She elbowed him and laughed out loud. "Get lost. I think 3 girls and 2 boys would be better," Ming said with a serious face. "In that case, our family will have 3 little princesses and 2 little knights. Why not a prince? The prince is the princess's partner. You can't have him so casually." Yu Lily couldn't help but smile. She looked up and saw his bright and deep peach blossom eyes. She put down the bowl in her hand and hugged him. "Thank you, Ming." The gentleness on Ming's face deepened. He held her in his arms and whispered, "Are you thanking me for giving you such a handsome husband? Go away, shameless." Yu Lily patted him and smiled. "I thought I wouldn't be able to have children in the future. Ever since the twins? Don't mention that." Ming covered her mouth and said, "The quintuplets will be angry." Yu Lily was speechless. "What's with that look? The quintuplets will really be angry." Ming smiled brightly and lowered his head to kiss her lips. "Don't think about the unhappy things in the past. Those 2 children are not fated with us. In the future we will have more children." That. Chapter 1460. "I hope so." Yu Lily leaned against Ming's chest, feeling a little guilty. The arrival of this child was a little sudden, and her heart had always had a kind of surreal feeling. It was another night of overtime. It had been a week since Ming and Yu Lily had gotten married. Yu hadn't seen Li Jinan for a week. She had heard that Li Jinan had been on a business trip abroad and was very busy. Many people hadn't seen him and didn't know where he had gone. In fact, even she didn't know about it. Yu's feelings had been a little complicated these days. Perhaps it was a common problem for humans. They would always pay attention to someone they had slept with. Even though she knew it was impossible for her to be with him, the lack of any news made her very concerned. Yu tried hard to put those thoughts aside and went out. Just as she hailed a cab, she received a text message on her phone. It was from a familiar number. "Shen Luo-an. Do you have time these days? I have something to discuss with you." Yu stared at the number for a long time before closing the page. Her phone vibrated again. "It's about the divorce." Yu was stunned. "Shen Luo-an wants to divorce me?" She stared at the string of words for a long time. An inexplicable feeling rose in her heart. Am I finally going to be liberated? But deep in her heart, there was a ferment of pain. Wave after wave, it gripped the tip of her heart, and it was difficult to bear. Tears welled up in her eyes and Yu laughed out loud. She stared at the string of words on her phone and took a deep breath. "Let's get divorced. Everyone will feel better after a divorce. But this time he wants a divorce. Who is it because of? Shin Manting? Guangkui." Yu felt a little upset and replied, "When? Shin Luo, and as soon as possible." "Ha." Yu returned home, took a shower and collapsed into bed. She slept until dawn. The next day she went to the office and applied for leave from the HR manager. Her leave was quickly approved and she bought the fastest ticket back to the capital. It was another foggy day. At a glance it was all gray. This is the capital. Just like the people in the imperial capital, no one could see through them. She called Shen Luo, but he seemed to be busy. After a long time he picked up the phone. "Hello? Have you arrived?" "Yeah, I'm at the airport. Where can I find you?" Yu went straight to the point. There was silence on the other end. She waited for a few seconds before asking, "What's wrong? Are you that impatient?" Shen Luo, Anne's voice seemed to carry a hint of bitterness. His indescribable emotions seeped into her heart. Her heart ached and she felt a lump in her throat. She almost couldn't hold back her tears. The feelings they had built up over the years couldn't just disappear like that. For many years, she had dreamed of marrying her beloved brother Luo-an. However, the grievances she had suffered over the past few years would not vanish just because of a few words from him. When he hated and resented her because of Guangkui, when he abandoned her because of Shin Manting, she would also be in pain. When there was no trust in a relationship, there was no need to continue it, no matter what their relationship was. Chapter 1461. "Yeah. I'm at the hospital. Come to the hospital." Shen Luo, and added, This is the hospital you came to the last time. With that he hung up. Yi Yu laughed bitterly. The last hospital was the one Guan Kui had been in. His meaning couldn't be any clearer. Shen Luo, and was with Guan Kui. Yi Yu hailed a cab to the hospital. She quickly found the ward she had been to the last time she had visited. Inside the ward, Guan Kui sat in her wheelchair. In her hands was a beautiful white wedding gown. Her face was filled with a blissful smile as she asked, "Mommy, do you think I look good in this wedding gown?" The wedding dress was huge. It was adorned with extravagantly beautiful sparkling diamonds. She gestured to herself and looked at Yi Tian with a radiant smile. "Shen Luo, and bought me this wedding dress. I love it so much." Yi Tian looked at Guan Kui warmly and took the wedding dress from her with both hands. She gestured to Guan Kui and said, "When Shen Luo and comes back, Mommy will help you change into this. We'll wear it for him to see." Yi Yu felt a dull pain in her chest. She stopped at the door of the ward and looked in. She saw her biological mother smiling warmly in front of another girl. Her heart was numb. Hadn't I been like this all these years? It didn't seem to make any difference. The sound of leather shoes came from behind her. It was the sound of calm and steady footsteps. Yi Yu turned her head. At a glance, she saw a face that she was all too familiar with. Shen Luo, and seemed much more tired than the last time they had met. His cheeks were sunken and there were dark circles under his eyes. There was a faint green ring around his lips. He looked much more haggard. He must have had a hard time these past few days. Was it because of Shin Manting? Or was it because of Guan Kui? Or was it because of me? Yi Yu couldn't help but laugh at that thought. Shen Luo, and looked at her and asked, "You're here?" Looking at Shen Luo, and Yi Yu's lips curled up into a smile as she said, "Isn't that obvious? When can we sign? I'm very busy." Shen Luo, and gazed deeply into her eyes. Then he averted his gaze and looked inside. Guan Kui and Yi Tian were both looking in their direction. It was obvious that they had noticed their presence. Guan Kui waved at Shen Luo, and then smiled sweetly. "Luo An." Shen Luo, and smiled gently at her and said, "Let's do it now. You'll be free in the future." Her eyes were looking at Guan Kui, but her words were directed at Yi Yu. She suddenly thought of what Shen Luo and had said on the phone just now. "Are you that impatient?" Yi Yu's heart sank. When she reached the Civil Affairs Bureau, Yi Yu took out the marriage certificate that she had treasured for a long time. When she replaced it with a divorce certificate, her heart didn't waver at all. As if that was how it should be. When they left the Civil Affairs Bureau together, he seemed to be in a terrible mood. As soon as he stepped out of the door, he lit up a cigarette in frustration. Originally Shen Luo, and did not like to smoke. When Yi Yu saw the way Shen Luo, and was smoking, the first person that came to mind was Li Jinan. Li Jinan was the most good-looking man she had ever seen smoking. Shen Luo, and noticed that she was a little distracted. Annoyed, he took a step forward and held her arm. Chapter 1462. Shen Luo, and looked into her eyes with a violent rage. His grip on her arm tightened as he said, "Yi Yu, don't you like me very much? Don't you love me? Why have you changed so quickly?" When Yi Yu heard that, she looked into his eyes. Her initial helplessness slowly faded. When he saw the look in Yi Yu's eyes, Shen Luo, An's heart grew colder. This pair of eyes that used to light up whenever they looked at him, this pair of eyes that used to smile whenever they saw him, now, how did it change? Everything was different from before. Shen Luo, An's grip on her hand tightened. An indescribable emotion welled up in his chest, threatening to burst out. "Mr. Shen, please conduct yourself with dignity." Yi Yu's voice was calm and distant as she waved her hand away. Shen Luo, An's grip on her hand didn't loosen in the slightest. Yi Yu looked into his eyes with a hint of sarcasm. "What do you mean by this? Get your ex-wife back? What about the one in the hospital? She can't take any provocation now." She had heard about Guan Kui's illness. Even under such circumstances, Shen Luo, and was willing to divorce her and marry Guan Kui. After all these years, he had treated her with true love. Yi Yu's face was full of sarcasm. It made Shen Luo An's heart ache. Suddenly he felt a lump in his throat. Shen Luo, and looked at the woman in front of him. Her eyes were still the same, but the distance between them had grown further and further apart. The childhood sweetheart he had once been so familiar with had become a stranger in the blink of an eye. They looked at each other without a word. Looking back, all that was left was the distance between them. "Yi Yu." Shen Luo, An's voice was a little hoarse. He held the cigarette between his fingers. The smoke rose into the air and clouded his eyes. Do you still love me? Yi Yu stared at him for a moment before softly replying, I did. I did. Shenluo, and had gotten the answer he wanted. It was just that his heart felt even more empty. He released Yi Yu's hand and laughed bitterly. He put out the cigarette in the trash can beside him. Then he got into his car and headed in the direction of the hospital. Yi Yu watched his back view from behind. Her heart couldn't help but tremble. Do you still love me? On countless nights, Yi Yu would ask herself the same question. Do you still love Shenluo? And still love. However, she could no longer afford to love him. Goodbye, Shenluo. Yi Yu stood rooted to the spot for a long time before taking a step forward. However, just as she was about to move, a black Bentley by the roadside whistled. Yi Yu looked in the direction of the voice and saw half a face peeking out from the window of the back seat. Her eyebrows were exquisite like a painting, and her lines were cold and firm. At this moment, a pair of phoenix eyes were looking straight at him, calm and profound. It was faint, but it made Yi Yu's heart flutter. She walked over. Before she reached the car, the chauffeur opened the door for her. Until they sat down, no one spoke. There was a faint scent of aromatherapy in the Bentley. As Yi Yu sat, she couldn't help but look out the window. Among the cars coming and going, there were also many men and women who were about to divorce or had already divorced driving side by side. But what were their feelings like? She turned her head to look at Li Jinan and asked, How did you know I was here? Chapter 1463. Li Jinan remained nonchalant. He glanced at her and replied, I was just passing by. Yi Yu didn't believe him. She turned to look at him. Her face was pale. In his palm there was a dark red book. The words divorce certificate were written on it. Li Jinan's mood improved. Let's go eat. What do you want to eat? Li Jinan moved closer to her and held her tightly clenched hand. Yi Yu's hand stiffened. She instinctively wanted to withdraw her hand. However, Li Jinan's grip tightened. Without a word, he flipped open the dark red booklet in her hand. When he saw Yi Yu's photo on the booklet, he felt relieved. Yi Yu looked at him and allowed him to hold the divorce certificate. Li Jinan didn't look well either. His eyes were dark and his facial features were more pronounced than they had been a week ago. He had lost weight. However, compared to Shenluo, his condition was undoubtedly much better. I don't feel like eating. Yi Yu turned her head to look out the window. She was feeling a little down. All right. GM Li, I want to resign. Li Jinan paused in the middle of flipping through the divorce certificate. He glanced sideways and saw her frail back. He closed the divorce certificate and asked, Why? I don't want to work anymore. You don't think I'm being treated well? No. I just want to change places. I don't want to stay in Kingstown anymore. I want to have some fun on my own for a while. Yi Yu kept looking out the window. The scenery flashed past her so quickly that it made her dizzy. Where are you going? I don't know. Yi Yu turned her head to look at him and smiled. She was probably going to a place far away where no one knew her and start over. Regardless of whether it was Kingstown or the capital, no one needed her anymore. She had once thought that the mother she loved the most in her life had become someone else's mother. The man she had once loved the most was about to marry Guan Kui and hated her to the core. She had no feelings for the Shen family and even less for the Guan family. As for Kingstown, Yi Chanshan could go find her own happiness. She would only do some trivial work in the company and could be replaced at any time. No one needed her anymore. At that thought, Yi Yu's heart ached. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she quickly suppressed them and turned to look out the window. Li Jinan could tell that she was in a bad mood. He put the divorce certificate back and nodded. That's fine too. I'll go with you. Yi Yu's heart tightened. She shook her head and said, There's no need. You still have a lot of work to do in the company. I can't hold you up. It's okay, I have my brother. He had complete trust in Li Xiqing's ability. Yi Yu was speechless. After a long time she finally said, I want to go alone. Just pretend that I don't exist. If you're happy, just pay attention to me. If you're not, just ignore me. Yi Yu was speechless. How could she ignore such a big man? Li Jinan acted as if he hadn't noticed her resistance and asked, Do you want to go to the country or overseas? There's a starlight town in New Zealand. I heard that it's very beautiful. During the day, it's filled with birds and fragrant flowers. At night, the sky is filled with stars and there are fireflies flying in the air. It's like being in a fairyland. Chapter 1464. When I grow up, I want to go to New Zealand. I heard that there's a small town called Starlight. During the day, it's full of birds and flowers. At night, wow, there's a sky full of stars. There are fireflies everywhere. It's so beautiful. It was just like the plot of an anime. Brother Luo, and can you take me there next time? Back then, Shin Luo, and smiled and lowered his eyes to look at her. There was an indescribable tenderness in his eyes. He nodded and said, as long as our Yu is happy. The words were still the same, so familiar. However, the person sitting beside her had changed. His heart felt like it was being gripped by a devil's claw. It was so unbearable that he couldn't breathe. Yuyu's vision blurred, but she quickly lowered her head and turned her head away. She didn't want him to see her pathetic state. Li Jinan didn't say anything else. He just sat there quietly. Soon the driver sent them to a restaurant. He got out of the car first and opened the door for her. Yuyu hesitated for a moment before walking down. She casually ordered a few dishes. She didn't eat much before claiming that she was full. Li Jinan was not in a hurry. He ate slowly, wiped the corner of his mouth and said, I'll send you back later. Let's go back to Kingstown together, Yuyu suggested. Li Jinan hadn't expected Yuyu to say that. He was stunned for a moment before nodding his head. Okay. Everything seemed very harmonious and quiet. When they arrived at the airport, Li Jinan asked for Yuyu's identification. After they bought their plane tickets, they returned to Kingstown together. Li Jinan's chauffeur had been waiting outside the airport for a long time. After sending Yuyu upstairs, Li Jinan turned to leave. When Yuyu returned to her room and looked out the window, she realized that the car didn't leave immediately. It stayed for a while before slowly driving away. He looked at the time. Yi Chanshan must have been working overtime. It was already past the time to get off work, but she still hadn't returned. It was a big house with 2 bedrooms and a living room, but it was a little empty. For some reason, Yuyu felt a little lonely. Once this feeling surged up, it was hard to suppress. Her heart felt empty, and she subconsciously thought of Shin Luo Han. Shin Luo, and must be happy about the divorce, right? Guan Kui and Yi Tian were the same. Her vision was blurry, and her heart felt like it was being squeezed. She couldn't stop herself from crying. She took a deep breath and wiped her face. She stood up and began to pack her luggage. After resigning, he had to go out for a walk. For so many years she had been accommodating and tolerating. She had long had enough. But where was he going? Li Jinan's mood was a little strange. After so many days of running around, he didn't feel as good as he had imagined when he saw them divorce. It was obvious that Yuyu was devastated. But it didn't matter. There was still a long way to go and things would slowly get better. However, he had to call and ask for leave as soon as possible. Li Jinan called Li Siqing. The other side seemed to be busy. The sound of children playing was very loud and it could be heard clearly over the phone. Wrong number? Or are you looking for me? Li Siqing did not mince his words. This guy would never come to a temple without a reason. Chapter 1465. It was a romantic tourist destination with men and women of all colors. By the time Yuyu reached the hotel, it was already the next morning. Because she had signed up for the Freedom Travel Hotel package, the room was a huge sea-view double room. Yuyu hung up her clothes on a hanger and put them in the closet. She changed into a new set of clothes and went to the beach. The sky was high and the sea was wide. The turquoise seawater gurgled. The sunlight shone on it, and the light reflected off the bodies of the passers-by. It was so dazzling that it made one feel hot. Yuyu was wearing a floor-length dress, classic beach slippers, a sun hat and sunglasses. As she watched the tourists from all over the world frolicking and chasing each other, her mood seemed to have lightened. She ordered a glass of fruit juice and found a beach chair by the water's edge to sit down. She lifted her dress a little, and the seawater rushed up to her ankles. It was very cold, but it was very comfortable in such weather. Yuyu kicked it a few times and leaned back comfortably on the chair. She closed her eyes. After about 10 minutes, someone came over and said, "Miss Yi, your drink is here." It wasn't the fluent English that she had just heard. Instead, it was a deep and formal Mandarin accent. The voice was very clear and familiar. When Yuyu heard the voice, her eyes flew open. She turned her head and saw the determined face of a man. Li Jinan was wearing a pair of sunglasses and a plain white linen shirt. It accentuated his already bulging muscles, making them look even more well-proportioned and sexy. "Why are you here?" Yuyu sat up immediately and looked at him in disbelief. "You followed me?" she asked in surprise. Of course not. I signed up for a tour with you. Have you forgotten? Li Jinan was unruffled. He didn't seem embarrassed at all that he had been exposed. Instead, his expression was indescribably natural. He sat down beside Yi Yu and said, "We just boarded the same plane. Didn't you see?" Yi Yu found it a little illogical. She looked at him and said, "How is that possible? You must have been following me. How could there be such a coincidence?" "I don't know why it's such a coincidence." Li Jinan suddenly leaned in and slowly said, "Perhaps it's fate. Wherever you are, my body can't control itself and automatically follows you." When Yi Yu heard that, she laughed angrily and said, "Nonsense. There's no such thing as fate. You're just following me." Li Jinan removed his sunglasses and chuckled as he replied, "Yeah, I'm following you. But I'm following you openly. You just didn't realize it. Don't blame me." "Excuses?" Li Jinan raised his eyebrows slightly. He raised the drink in his hand and said, "It's a vacation. Of course it's only fun when there are at least two of us. If you're alone you'll only get more bored." Yi Yu didn't want to pay any attention to him. She snatched the drink from his hand and took a deep gulp. She sat down on the chair and stared ahead angrily. Li Jinan followed suit and sat down. He gazed into the distance. The golden sunlight sprinkled down, plating the originally clear mirror-like surface with a layer of crystal light, magnificent and magnificent. Flocks of seagulls swept across the water, energetic and flamboyant. Everything was just perfect. He turned to look at Yi Yu and asked, "What's the point of just sitting here? Why don't I take you somewhere fun?" That. Chapter 1466. What? Let's go. Indeed, Li Jinan took Yi Yu to many places. The Hawaiian Islands were huge and they had all kinds of classic attractions. It was magnificent. Yi Yu hadn't intended to go anywhere when she came there. She had only wanted to play in the water, bask in the sun, and be a quiet, salted fish. But being led by Li Jinan all the way, she found it very refreshing and exciting. After leaving the volcano, Yi Yu's stomach was growling with hunger. Although she had bought snacks along the way to fill her stomach, it wasn't as reliable as a proper meal. Yi Yu rubbed her already rumbling stomach and said, "I'm hungry. Let's go back and eat." Li Jinan was hungry as well, but seeing how much fun Yi Yu was having, he didn't want to interrupt her. When he heard her say that, he led her to the route that they had planned out. There was a restaurant near the hotel that served Western cuisine. After Yi Yu ordered her food, she ate some appetizers. When the main course was served, she wasn't as hungry anymore. Yi Yu sipped her soup slowly and watched Li Jinan cut the steak. When Li Jinan was done cutting the steak, he picked it up and handed it to her. Yi Yu immediately picked it up and exchanged it with him. A whole steak in exchange for a cut steak. What a bargain. Yi Yu picked up the fork and started eating. She ate with relish and looked very satisfied. As she ate, she began to doze off. Li Jinan saw that and couldn't help but speed up his eating, but his posture remained elegant. In the end, when Li Jinan finished eating, Yi Yu was still eating slowly. Her eyelids were fighting to stay open. "Let's go back to the hotel," Li Jinan said. When Yi Yu heard that, she immediately shielded the plate in front of her and said, "I haven't finished eating yet." Li Jinan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "You're already so sleepy and you still want to finish eating? Don't eat too much before bed. It's not good for your stomach." "I can still fight a little more," Yi Yu said. She picked up her fork and put 2 mouthfuls of food into her mouth. After that, she drank a mouthful of water. When she finished the food, she realized that her stomach was already bloated. Li Jinan laughed and said, "Let's go." Yi Yu put down her fork reluctantly and stood up. Perhaps it was because she was really exhausted that she couldn't even walk steadily. She stumbled and almost fell. At that critical moment, Li Jinan rushed forward to support her. Yi Yu's body fell into his arms. The man's scorching temperature was very warm. Yi Yu was beyond sleepy. She stood up straight and forced herself to walk forward. Li Jinan followed behind her silently. After paying the bill, he left with her. Just as Yi Yu was about to return to her room, she suddenly realized something very important. Yi Yu was shocked. "Oh no. What's wrong?" It was rare for Li Jinan to see her so nervous. "My handbag is missing. There are room cards, passports and cell phones inside." It was only then that Li Jinan realized that Yi Yu had such a thing on her. The bag was about the size of a mobile phone, so it was really inconspicuous. Yi Yu began to panic. How did this happen? Am I not allowed to go back? My passport is in there too. That won't happen, Li Jinan said. Think about where you dropped it. We'll go back and look for it. Yu was a little lost. I don't know, dash. Chapter 1467. Li Jinan didn't know what to do with her. In exasperation, he took out his room card and said, "Why don't you sleep in my room first? I'll go back and look for it. I have my passport with me." Yu felt that it was inappropriate. She felt a little embarrassed and said, "I don't think that's a good idea. It's fine. You must be exhausted today. Rest early. Leave the rest to me." Li Jinan stuffed the room card into Yuyu's hand and turned around. Yu held the room card in her hand and stared at his back. She was a little stunned. After a long time, she turned around and followed the location of the room card to look for it. Li Jinan looked around in the direction he had come from. From what he remembered, the bag should have been white. It was about the size of a cell phone and had a long strap. However, after looking all around, he didn't see the bag. Could it have fallen into the volcanic area? Li Jinan felt that something was wrong. After calling for help, he couldn't take it anymore. For the past few days, he had been busy running around the capital. He hadn't slept since the previous day. During that time, he was either going through documents on the plane or looking for someone to play with in Hawaii. His head hurt. Li Jinan felt helpless. He had no choice but to return to the hotel and use his passport to get another room. However, the receptionist politely told him that one ID could only register for one room. Li Jinan went out for another round. He realized that all the hotels nearby were either too far away or fully booked. Apart from some of his ID, he didn't have anything else on him. After going around in circles, Li Jinan returned to the hotel he had been at. After informing the receptionist that he had lost his room card, he gave her the room number and paid for a new room card. He returned to the room Yu was in. When Li Jinan opened the door, his mind was filled with thoughts of how to explain his actions to Yu. Actually, he hadn't intended to stay in the same room as her. He had merely wanted her to have a good rest. However, when Li Jinan opened the door, all his words were stuck in his chest. Yu was already sound asleep. She had only taken off her shoes and was curled up on the blanket. Her breathing was even. She looked very peaceful. Perhaps she was exhausted, but she didn't notice that he had entered. Li Jinan's explanation died in his throat. Seeing her posture, he suddenly felt a strange feeling in his heart. This feeling was inexplicable. Even Li Jinan himself couldn't tell what kind of emotion it was, but it began to swell violently in his heart. It had already greatly affected his emotions. Walking over quietly, Li Jinan saw the way she looked, and the corners of his mouth slightly raised. He gently moved her a little, then flipped up the quilt and covered her body. Yu still hadn't woken up. Her breathing was getting heavier and she was fast asleep. Li Jinan quietly took off his shoes. He didn't dare to shower. He switched off the lights and lay down on the sofa with his eyes closed. That night, the atmosphere was very tranquil. Just like the climate in Hawaii, it was so comfortable that it made people fascinated. When Yu woke up, the sky was already bright. After sleeping in the same position for so long, his body felt a little sore. Chapter 1468. Yuyu's heart skipped a beat. She suddenly turned her head. When she saw Li Jinan, she suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. Li Jinan seemed to have heard the movement. He frowned, then opened his eyes and looked over. When he saw Yuyu's shocked expression, he immediately sobered up. Li Jinan sat up and looked at her. "You're awake? I couldn't find your bag. One ID can only be used for one room, so..." Yu was a little embarrassed. She stood up and said, "Jim Li, thank you." "You're welcome." Li Jinan looked at the time and said, "Let's go for breakfast." Yu had a good sleep, but the dark circles under Li Jinan's eyes had deepened. Well, after sleeping on the sofa for the whole night, Yu felt even more guilty, but she didn't say anything. She went straight into the bathroom to wash up and then came out. Li Jinan was on the phone. When he saw her come out, he didn't have much of a reaction. He said to the person on the phone, "Well, I have to go. Goodbye." Yu felt a little strange. Staying in the same room with Li Jinan, she had a very strange feeling in her heart. It was like having an affair. Although she and Shinluo were divorced, perhaps because this idea was deeply rooted in her heart, Yu couldn't get rid of it. Bah. What affair? Although she had slept in the same room as Li Jinnan, at least nothing had happened. Yi Yuyu encouraged herself. By the time she put on her shoes, Li Jinnan was already done. What do you want to eat? I'm fine with anything. Yi Yuyu was very easygoing and followed Li Jinnan to the dining room. There were many people with Asian skin in the dining room. Yi Yuyu felt very close to him. Are you used to it? Li Jinnan opened the menu and asked casually. It's fine. I feel quite comfortable here. Yi Yuyu looked around and was in a good mood. Li Jinnan looked up at her and his lips were slightly raised. He seemed to be in a very good mood. After ordering something, he handed the menu to the waiter. With his long fingers crossed, Li Jinnan looked at Yi Yuyu and said, In the future, do you have any plans? Yi Yuyu thought for a moment and shook her head. Not at the moment. I want to play for a while. The world is still very big and I want to see it. Yeah. Li Jinnan put his hands down and nodded his head. This kind of life isn't bad, but I feel that young people should strive harder. At your age and in your current state, it's the best time to work hard. Yi Yuyu knew what he meant and asked, You want me to act? I have a few good roles recently. Yi Yuyu smiled. I think it's better to live a simple life. After I come back from my vacation, I want to learn something to enrich myself. Then I'll find a small place with mountains and rivers to live. Such a life was poetic and beautiful. Chapter 1469. Yi Yuyu was stunned. She looked at Li Jinnan as if she already knew what he meant. When Li Jinnan met her gaze, he immediately said, It's too boring to live alone. Humans are social animals. If you're alone, you'll be bored to death. You can get a friend to stay with you. Yi Chanshan was speechless. I'll get a dog and let it watch the sunrise and sunset with me. When Yi Yuyu said that, she couldn't maintain the expression on her face. Her hands trembled slightly as they rested on the table. When the time comes, we'll get a dog together and watch the sunrise and sunset together. His warm and mellow voice seemed to ring in her ears. The same words were said again, but they had changed from we to me. Li Jinnan sensed that something was wrong with her mood and didn't continue. He began to reflect on himself. Was I too anxious? Yi Yuyu's emotions had clearly not stabilized. Divorcing Shen Luo and seemed to be a huge blow to her. Shen Luo and Li Jinnan's eyes were as bright as the stars in the night sky. They darkened as he said, How can a dog be fun? A person can be fun as they please. At that moment, a yellow-skinned waiter walked over with a tray of food. When he heard that, he chuckled. Yi Yuyu's face suddenly turned red. She glared at him. The sadness in her heart immediately turned into anger. She said, How can you be so bad? Am I bad? Li Jinnan looked as if he didn't know what was going on. What are you thinking about? Yi Yuyu took the toast and took a bite. She decided not to talk to him anymore. Li Jinnan didn't give in and said, How can your thoughts be so bad? And to think that you're a girl. Yi Yuyu was so angry that her masseter muscles tightened. She growled, Isn't that what you mean? Yes, Li Jinnan admitted it openly. Yi Yuyu choked on her toast. She glared at him with an expression that said she wanted to strangle him. Li Jinnan immediately handed her the water. Slowly. Yi Yuyu took 2 large gulps. She was so angry that her chest hurt. Are you angry? Li Jinnan chuckled. That won't do. We still have to go out to play later. I'll be embarrassed if you do this. Yi Yuyu had originally been angry, but when she heard his cheerful voice, her anger evaporated. She glared at him and retorted, Who wants to hang out with you? Hey, you're not even giving me a chance to redeem myself now? Li Jinnan looked a little exasperated. He picked up a sandwich and asked, Do you want a sandwich? Not eating. I want to eat bread. Order it yourself. Yi Yuyu didn't stand on ceremony. She held the bread in her hand tightly. Li Jinnan stared ahead, but his eyes weren't on the bread. They were on Yi Yuyu. His aggressive gaze made Yi Yuyu feel uncomfortable. She said, Don't look at me. Li Jinnan laughed and remarked, You look good. Yi Yuyu felt that she had been praised and her mood improved. Before she could react, Li Jinnan leaned over and took a bite of her bread. His warm and moist lips even grazed her palm. Yi Yuyu's body stiffened. She suddenly shivered and froze on the spot. Li Jinnan chewed. As if he hadn't noticed Yi Yuyu's reaction, he said, Not bad. Chapter 1470. Yi Yuyu saw his deep gaze and blushed. She put the bread back on the plate and said, You. Li Jinnan reached his hand out to take it and said, Thank you. Just as he was about to say thank you, Yi Yuyu stopped him with a slap of her hand. Yi Yuyu was a little angry as she asked, "What are you doing? Didn't you give the bread to me to eat? It would be a waste not to have it." "No way. Let go of it." If she gave it to Li Jinan now, wouldn't he end up eating the place where she had eaten? That's so disgusting. No. When Li Jinan heard that, he looked at her hand and said, "You're the one who's taking advantage of me." Yi Yuyu immediately retracted her hand. He picked up the toast and began to eat it in a leisurely manner. Yi Yuyu's face burned. She had never imagined that Li Jinan, who looked so decent, would act like a hooligan. Furthermore, he was trying to steal her food. How despicable. Li Jinan acted as if he hadn't seen it. He pushed the sandwich over and said, "I don't like sandwiches." Yi Yuyu had already eaten half of the toast. Her stomach was already half full. When she saw the sandwich in its entirety, she knew that she wouldn't be able to finish it. The other half of the toast had already been eaten by Li Jinan. Other than the sausages and biscuits, she didn't have anything else to eat. She picked up the sandwich angrily. After 2 bites, Yi Yuyu felt sick of it. The sandwiches at this place were really poorly made. It was no wonder that Li Jinan refused to eat it. Tiske. What a scheming man. After putting the sandwich down, Yi Yuyu continued to eat the sausages. She picked up the knife and fork and cut the sausages into 8 pieces just like Li Jinan. She felt much better. After a few bites, she suddenly realized that the sandwich in front of her had disappeared. She looked up and saw Li Jinan eating the sandwich that she had just eaten. "Didn't you say that you didn't like it?" Yi Yuyu growled through gritted teeth. Li Jinan didn't even look up as he replied, "You're too wasteful. Who asked me to be with you? I can only eat the leftovers." Yi Yuyu became even angrier and retorted, "You were the one who stole my bread. Of course I can't finish so many sandwiches." "But you can eat the grilled sausage," Li Jinan said calmly and glanced at her. "Tiske, you obviously don't want to eat it. You don't want to eat it either. So I gave it to you. If you don't want it, then give it to me. Do you think I'm a good-for-nothing?" "No, I'm just being modest." "Bah. You obviously don't want to eat it. Aren't I eating right now?" Li Jinan looked at her with a straight face and asked, "How can you distort the truth?" Yi Yuyu was speechless. She finally understood that there was actually such a shameless person in this world. She couldn't even win an argument against such a fellow, and she was even called a thief by a thief. Yi Yuyu laughed in exasperation and said, "I didn't expect you to be so eloquent." "Just as so," Li Jinan said humbly. He then continued, "I'm just a little better than you." Yi Yuyu viciously stabbed the fork into a piece of intestine. She picked it up and bit down hard. She deliberately didn't bite through it and tore it apart. Li Jinan's throat tightened as he watched. His mouth felt dry. Chapter 1471. Li Jinan quickly lowered his head. He was shocked by his own reaction. On the other hand, Yi Yuyu assumed that her threat had successfully intimidated Li Jinan. Her initial anger dissipated by a large margin. Li Jinan finished the rest of his food in silence. He took a deep breath to calm himself down and said, "Let's go." Yi Yuyu leisurely took a sip of water and stood up. Without a word, she led the way. The two of them first went to the embassy to report the loss of their passports. Unexpectedly, there were many people in the embassy. They queued for a while and half the day passed just like that. By the time the two of them came out, it was already afternoon. The two of them were in much better shape than they had been the night before. It was just a pity that they didn't have a place to play. In the end, they unanimously decided to go to Binhai Bar. There were quite a number of bars in Binhai. There were many people inside and every bar was very lively. It was Li Jinan's first time visiting a bar in a foreign country. There were people from all over the world and all of them were talking in different languages. It was a good thing that the host of the bar was speaking English, so they didn't have to be at a loss for words. Many of the people who came were tourists from all over the country. They were very enthusiastic and open. When they saw Li Jinan, a blonde woman whistled at him. She was wearing a sexy bikini and walked over to Li Jinan. In broken Mandarin she asked, "Hey, are you from China?" Li Jinan's face was expressionless. He nodded his head and didn't reply. When the woman saw that, she leaned forward and asked, "Are you alone?" She seemed to be unable to continue. She quickly reverted to fluent American English and said, "Do you want to join us for a drink? I'm sitting over there. My friends and I are there." Li Jinan looked in the direction she was pointing and immediately saw a large group of foreigners. There were both black and white people. Many of them were whistling and waving in their direction. It was as if they were looking forward to it. Yi Yu squeezed through the crowd and saw that Li Jinan was being hit on. She shook her head and clicked her tongue. Indeed, a good-looking person would stand out no matter where he went. When Li Jinan saw the scene, he frowned. He didn't really interact with strangers, especially since his English wasn't that good. Just as he was about to reject the offer, he caught a glimpse of a petite figure hidden in the middle of the crowd, looking in his direction. Li Jinan took a step forward and pulled Yi Yu over. He told the woman, "I'm not alone. I'm with my girlfriend." Yi Yu was a little confused. She was firmly held in his arms. When she saw the surprised look on the American girl's face, she laughed dryly and reached out her hand to greet, "Hello." The blonde beauty laughed and said, "That's even better. We really like playing with Chinese people. Your Chinese language is very interesting, and your Chinese people are also very good-looking. We like Chinese people. Miss, I'm Tina." The beauty extended her hand to Yi Yu with a bright smile. Yi Yu instinctively reached out to shake his hand. With a smile she replied, "Yo-yo?" With that, she pointed at Li Jinan and said, "My boss Nan." Chapter 1472. Li Jinan's hand remained in front of Yi Yu's chest. His arm was muscular and strong. His black short-sleeved t-shirt accentuated his figure perfectly. The lines of his muscles made one's blood boil. When she heard Li Jinan's sudden question, Yi Yu laughed and immediately denied it. No, it was obvious that the beauty was interested in Li Jinan. There was no way she was going to stand in the way of Li Jinan's romance. When the beauty saw that they each had their own version of events, she understood and said, "Okay, everyone is having fun. Come, let's have some fun together." With that, she reached out and pulled Yi Yu over. As Yi Yu was being pulled away, she didn't forget to turn back and tug on Li Jinan. Li Jinan was pulled along and naturally they walked over. A bunch of people were sitting together and reveling. In front of them were bottles of alcohol. The alcohol they were drinking wasn't beer or anything like that. Instead, it was bottles of liquor that looked like it had a high alcohol content. Whiskey XO. When Li Jinan saw that, he felt that something was amiss. He pulled Yi Yu up and said, "Don't drink with strangers." When Yi Yu was pulled, she felt that it was inappropriate as well. However, the beauty pulled her over to sit with the group of girls. Li Jinan frowned and said, "Tell them that we're leaving." Li Jinan wasn't good at English. He could understand and speak a little, but he wasn't fluent. Yi Yu quickly relayed the message and said, "My boss doesn't like to hang out with strangers." "Hey, don't be like that, my China friend. We like China friends. It's fine if you don't drink. Can you tell me what's fun in China?" A burly man with a full beard walked over. He reeked of smoke and alcohol, but his eyes were clear and bright. He looked friendly. The moment he walked over, he hooked his arm around Li Jinan's shoulder and said, "Wow, you're so tall. You don't look like a China person at all." Li Jinan was 1.9 meters tall. Indeed, he was considered very tall in China. "It's all right, GM Li, sit down. If you can't continue the conversation, we'll just leave." Yi Yu counted the number of people. There were 5 women and 3 men. The women all had good figures, but they didn't have any obvious muscles. They were all dressed skimpily. It was obvious that they were there to have fun. As for the men, one of them had already put on some weight, and the other 2 looked younger. They were tender and looked like a boiled chicken. Li Jinan would definitely be able to defeat them. More importantly, the American lady was very pretty. It was obvious that she was interested in Li Jinan. Why not help him look for her? What if Li Jinan ended up liking her? As Yi Yu thought about it, the image of Li Jinan standing together with the girl appeared in her mind. Although he was from a foreign country, at least, he was better than a divorced woman, right? Yi Yu's heart ached a little, but at the same time she felt an inexplicable sense of relief. He beckoned Li Jinan over and said, "Jim Li, come over and have a seat." Li Jinan could tell that Yi Yu was looking forward to it. He stood there for a moment before walking over and sitting down next to Yi Yu. Yi Yu said in English, "We don't drink, but I can tell you." She talked about traditional culture, the 8 major cuisines, and the various historical classics. Li Jinan listened to her speak. Yi Yu's English had a Chinese accent, so Li Jinan could understand her completely. The group gathered around and listened attentively. After talking for a long time, Yi Yu began to feel thirsty. She asked, "Is there any water?" Chapter 1473. Yi Yu's mouth was very dry. When she heard that there was only alcohol, she didn't dare drink it. She said, "Forget it, have a seat. I'll go get it." Li Jinan stood up and quickly walked away. Yi Yu nodded her head and continued talking to them. A girl beside her brought over a bottle of drink and said, "Have some to quench your thirst. There's no water or drinks in this bar. You'll have to walk a little further to the rest stop in front." Yi Yu glanced at it. It was a glass of green liquid. It looked like it was steaming. It was probably soda. Yi Yu took it from her and thanked her. She took a sip and realized that it tasted of alcohol. It was very faint, but it was definitely there. She asked, "Is this a cocktail?" "Yes. The alcohol content is very low. It's fine. You won't get drunk." The girls waved their hands as they spoke. They began to tell Yi Yu about the customs of Chicago. As Yi Yu listened, she felt even thirstier. She almost finished the cocktail. Her alcohol tolerance wasn't bad. One bottle of cocktail wasn't enough to get her drunk. Yi Yu didn't take it to heart at all. When Li Jinan came in with a bottle of water, he saw the nearly empty bottle in front of her. His brows immediately furrowed together and he asked, "What did you drink?" "A little cocktail." Yi Yu noticed that Li Jinan's expression wasn't too good. "It's fine. Everyone is just chatting and having fun. They don't have any ill intentions toward us. It's not as chaotic as you think." It wasn't that Li Jinan was afraid of what they would do, but he was exasperated by Yi Yu's lack of vigilance. He said, "How dare you mess around when I'm not around? If they put something in there, it'll be no laughing matter." With that, he walked in and sat down beside Yi Yu. The group of Americans didn't understand what Li Jinan had just said, but they could tell from his expression that he wasn't happy. They looked at each other and shrugged their shoulders innocently. Li Jinan had bought quite a number of drinks, including various flavors of fruit juice and mineral water. He placed them on the table and said, "Have some water." The group of people had been thinking about how to lighten the mood. When they heard Li Jinan's words, they didn't stand on ceremony. They each took a bottle and said, "It's boring to keep talking. Let's play something interesting." Yi Yu's interest was piqued. After chatting for a while, she found this group of people very interesting. She asked, "What do you want to play?" "Look, they are a couple from California and they are sisters from Chicago. Everyone is the same. We don't know each other except for our names. So, Nan, you don't have to be too wary of us. We are all here to have fun, so don't be too nervous." Tina waved her hand and said, "Yo-Yo is very cute, but her boyfriend is too strict. Yo-Yo will be unhappy." Those words were, of course, directed at Li Jinan. Li Jinan understood. He opened a bottle of mineral water and responded. Yi Yu quickly explained, "That's what he is, but he's not my boyfriend. He's my... What are we playing?" Li Jinan interrupted her and asked. Chapter 1474. When they heard the suggestion, many people were eager to give it a try. Tina looked at Li Jinan and asked, "Hey Nan, do you want to join us?" Li Jinan took a sip of water and glanced at Yi Yu. Yi Yu didn't know whether it was better to play along or to think it over. She didn't mind playing with this group of people, but it was a little weird to play with Li Jinan. What if they asked some very restricted questions? What should he do? When Li Jinan saw Yi Yu's hesitation, he agreed without hesitation and said, "Yeah, I'll do it." Yi Yu thought about it and nodded her head. Tina was very enthusiastic. She quickly packed up her things and picked up a bottle of whiskey to spin. The mouth of the bottle spun rapidly. When it finally slowed down, everyone's eyes were fixed on the mouth of the bottle. Unfortunately, Tina was the first person to be spun. Tina shrugged her shoulders and stuck out her tongue. She said, "Oh, what bad luck. I've done myself in. I choose Dare." "Yo-ho." A man whistled and exclaimed, "Tina's the best." A girl looked at Tina mischievously and asked, "Dare, is it? In that case, can you go on stage and take off your clothes before coming back?" When he heard the word Dare, Li Jinan frowned. Yi Yu felt a little excited as well. However, Yi Yu had a natural inclination for adventure. She could totally accept this kind of excitement. Tina didn't seem to mind and replied, Oh, of course." With that, she walked up to the stage where everyone was singing and dancing. The stage was filled with the band and dance troops. When they saw Tina climb up, they were all a little surprised. Just as they were about to chase Tina away, she lifted her top and winked seductively at her friends. That direction. Perhaps it was a coincidence, but it happened to be Li Jinan. All the men and women in the audience looked over and cheered. Tina lifted her top and quickly took it off, revealing her sexy figure. On her healthy, wheat-colored skin, the curves of her curves were perfect. Her waistline was alluring, and her voluptuous breasts were supported by her bra. Her cleavage was snow-white and sexy. She attracted the attention of many people. The crowd was in an uproar. Tina, on the other hand, did a somersault and walked down the stage. Surrounded by a group of people trying to strike up a conversation, he walked back without any distractions. Yu admired her and looked at her figure enviously. She praised, "You have a great figure." Before Tina could say anything, Li Jinan spoke up first and said, "Yours is better than hers." Li Jinan said it in English and everyone laughed. Tina also smiled and said, "I really want to see it. I'll definitely take yours off later." Yuyu's face reddened. She nudged Li Jinan with her elbow and said, "Don't spout nonsense. It is indeed better than her. I don't like this kind of body." Li Jinan looked straight ahead. His gaze quickly landed on Yu and said, "I like your meaty type. It's comfortable to the touch." Yuyu's face turned even redder. She reached out and pinched his arm. Seeing their actions, the crowd became a little dubious. Someone asked, "Yo-Yo, didn't you say that he's your boss?" Yu smiled awkwardly and nodded her head. Just as she was about to speak, he interrupted again and said, "He's my boyfriend." Chapter 1475. Yu began to suspect that Tina had done it on purpose. It had just been Tina, and now it was Li Jinan's turn. No matter how she looked at it, it was too much of a coincidence. Tina shrugged and said, Oh, man, it's your turn. Dare or truth?" "It's the truth." Li Jinan was very calm. He merely glanced at Tina. Tina looked at Yu and asked, "Yo-Yo, do you have any questions?" No. She didn't have much interest in his private life, nor did she want to know about his past. Because she seemed to already know that the love life of a soldier should be a blank. Otherwise, he wouldn't have thought of taking responsibility for his first time. Before Tina could say anything, a girl beside her said eagerly, "Mr. Nan, have you ever had a girlfriend? How many times and at what age?" "Yes, once, 29 yuan, Li Jinan answered simply and to the point. When Yu heard that, she was a little shocked. She used her fingers to calculate his age. Li Jinan seems to be 29 at the moment. Up until now, Li Jinan hadn't had any other woman by his side other than her. In other words, now? Himself? What? How could this be? When the girl heard that, she asked, "How old is Mr. Nan now?" "One truth can only answer one question, and I've already answered 3. Li Jinan took a sip of water and rejected her unhurriedly. The girl didn't feel embarrassed at all. Instead, the way she looked at Li Jinan became even more infatuated. She said in English, "I always thought that Chinese men were weak and cultured. I didn't expect there to be such a manly man. Oh my God, the Chinese men that I've come into contact with in the past were all weak." His voice was not loud, but his emotions were extremely agitated. Li Jinan ignored her and turned the bottle. Since he was using more strength than Tina, his speed was naturally much faster. After a long time, he finally stopped and turned to the fattest of the 3 American men. The bearded man covered his face in disbelief, his face full of grief and indignation. His wife, who was sitting next to him, immediately turned around and glared at him. She asked, "Truth or dare?" "Oh no, I choose dare." "No, you have to choose the truth. Otherwise you can't go back to California." His wife looked a little fierce, but her tone was very calm as she threatened him. The bearded middle-aged man pressed his face flat and said helplessly, "All right, I choose truth. Have you ever slept with our neighbor Annalise?" "Of course not." The bearded man screamed out of reflex. He looked at her in disbelief and said, "How could you think that? Annalise is the mother of 3 children. She has such a big belly and so much meat on her body. How could I like her? My wife is so beautiful, why would I look for that kind of woman?" "Really? Then what were you nervous about just now? I'm afraid that you'll ask me where my private money is hidden." "Oh no, I seem to have missed something." The bearded man immediately covered his mouth, and everyone around him burst into laughter. Yu smiled and looked at them enviously. This kind of love, even though it was noisy, but the days passed very comfortably. This man seemed to be afraid of his wife, but was he really afraid? Chapter 1476. After fooling around for a while, the bearded man quickly spun the bottle again. Everyone was filled with anticipation and fear. Under everyone's anticipation, the bottle finally turned to another American girl. Perhaps it was because Americans were more open-minded, but after a moment of surprise, the bottle turned to another American girl. "Oh dear." Tina smiled wickedly and asked, "Do you like bananas?" The girl immediately understood what Tina was getting at. She covered her face in disbelief and said, "No." Quite a number of people started to make a ruckus. The men even started to whistle. Tina picked up a banana and winked at the girl. She said, "Use your best move to eat it. Make it more seductive. Go for it." No. The girl was extremely resistant and said, "I don't think that's appropriate. It's your choice to choose, dare. If you're so uninhibited, why did you choose this? Quick, quick, quick." The girl was on the verge of tears. She had no choice but to hold the banana in her hand and slowly peel it. Everyone focused their attention on her. The girl quickly released herself. Her eyes were seductive as she stuck out her tongue and gently licked the top of the banana. The tip of her tongue was sharp and nimble. It wrapped around the banana and slowly began to lick it. Her movements were light, wild, and indescribably seductive. Yi Yu's face turned red as she watched. The scene was like one of those pornographic films that she and Yi Chanchan had secretly watched. In fact, it was even more explicit and made her feel even more embarrassed. There were only a few men at the scene. Their expressions were a little strange as they stared at the girl, unable to take their eyes off her. The bearded man's eyes were covered by his wife, but the other two didn't bother to hide their eyes. Yi Yu's heart was filled with disgust. She instinctively looked at Li Jinan. Li Jinan's expression was the same as usual. He watched the girl lick the banana without any change in expression. As if sensing Yi Yu's gaze, Li Jinan quickly turned his head and looked at her. Yi Yu asked softly, "Is it nice? All men like to watch such things, don't they?" Even as a woman, she found it very entertaining. Unexpectedly, Li Jinan didn't look in her direction and replied, "It's so. The woman licked the banana until it was burnt, and saliva dripped down her chin. She was full of eroticism and lust. Yi Yu looked at the woman and gulped. For some reason she felt uncomfortable. A seductive feeling came from the depths of his bones, just like when he sneakily watched porn. Too powerful, Yi Yu felt a little thirsty. She picked up a drink and opened it. She took a sip and quietly turned her head to look at Li Jinan. Unexpectedly, it was as if Li Jinan hadn't shifted his gaze from the beginning. In the blink of an eye he was looking right at her. Yi Yu's heart skipped a beat. Very quickly hot air rose to her ears. He averted his eyes and pretended not to see anything, pretending to be calm and at ease. The woman threw away the banana that was licked into a mess, shrugged and said, "Oh no, this is really embarrassing." The two men who had been watching the entire time had already raised their hands up high. The way they looked at her was dyed with a slightly different color and they whistled. This was a top-grade chick. Perhaps all men would want to spend some time with such a woman. Chapter 1477. The exquisite girl acted as if she hadn't seen the silent invitation from the two men. She quickly spun the bottle. Very quickly the mouth of the bottle landed on Yi Yu. The exciting moment had come to an end. When everyone saw that it was Yi Yu, they lost all their enthusiasm. They all knew that Yi Yu would never choose dare. As expected, Yi Yu announced without hesitation, "Truth." Everyone had already expected that. They didn't have much hope for this flat and introverted Chinese girl. Tina looked at Li Jinan and asked, "Nan, is there anything you'd like to ask? Are you sleepy?" Li Jinan looked at Yi Yu. "Let's go back." He had spoken in Mandarin, so no one understood him. Yi Yu was taken aback. She asked, "Isn't it a little early? It's already 1 a.m. I'm sleepy." Li Jinan stood up and said, "This kind of game isn't suitable for us." Yi Yu agreed. Most importantly, Li Jinan wasn't enjoying himself. Compared to the previous time at his friend's bar, Li Jinan was a lot more active. Yi Yu still stood up and said, "I'm sorry, but we have to go back." Everyone was surprised when they heard that. "Hey, why so soon?" Tina said, "Yo-Yo, you haven't answered the truth yet. If Nan doesn't ask, I'll ask." Yi Yu and Li Jinan stopped in their tracks and looked over. Tina looked at Yi Yu and asked, "Do you love Nan?" Yi Yu hadn't expected Tina to ask such a question. She paused for a moment, feeling both surprised and embarrassed. Faced with everyone's gaze, Yi Yu thought for a moment and decided to tell the truth. "No." Li Jinan's expression darkened. He turned his head. His eyes were as sharp as swords as they shot toward her. He reached out and pulled Yi Yu over. His action was a little forceful as he pulled her out of the bar. It was sweltering outside. Everything around them seemed to be repressing and restraining themselves just like Li Jinan. Li Jinan's footsteps were swift as he pulled Yi Yu ahead of him. It was difficult for Yi Yu to keep up. Slow down. Yi Yu grabbed his hand and called out, "GM Li." Li Jinan stopped walking. At the corner of the street he pressed her against the wall. For some reason Yi Yu began to feel nervous. Li Jinan's dark eyes were like silver hooks that hooked her heart. Yi Yu looked at his violent eyes and her heart raced. "GM Li." Li Jinan tilted his head slightly and leaned in closer, directly blocking the words she was about to say. Yi Yu was surprised. Although this wasn't the first time he had kissed her, she still felt an indescribable feeling in her heart. A sense of unease and incongruity was everywhere. There was something that was reminding her that she and Li Jinan weren't compatible. Yi Yu reached out and tried to move her head away, but Li Jinan held it tightly and pinned it firmly against the wall in the corner. Many people saw it, but they pretended not to see it. Li Jinan's kiss became deeper and deeper, more forceful and wilder. Yi Yu almost couldn't breathe. It was as if all the energy in her body had been sucked out. She struggled helplessly. After an indeterminate amount of time, Li Jinan finally released her. Where their lips met, a strand of silvery hair flowed out. It was seductive and seductive. Li Jinan pressed his body against hers and whispered, "Let's do it." Chapter 1478. Perhaps it was because Li Jinan's words were too direct, but Yi Yu didn't react in time. Li Jinan closed in on her with narrowed eyes. He bent his knee slightly and hooked it between her legs. He rubbed it gently and slowly. Yi Yu had just seen the girl licking that thing. She felt uncomfortable all over. When she felt Li Jinan's movement, she shivered. Goosebumps broke out all over her body. She couldn't help but revel in it. Yi Yu's hand rested gently on Li Jinan's shoulder as she moaned softly. Li Jinan already knew the answer. He pulled her back to the hotel in no time. Yi Yu followed behind him without saying a word. Her heartbeat suddenly sped up. The faint burning desire in her body was clearly affecting her, like a feather, gently stirring and stirring. Li Jinan used the key card to open the door. He pulled her along and prepared to enter the room. Yi Yu retreated at the last minute. She retracted her hand and said, I think I'd better go back to my room to sleep." Li Jinan's eyes darkened. He pulled her over, wrapped her up, and carried her over his shoulder. He closed the door behind him and tossed her onto the bed. Yi Yu yelped. Before she could react, her body was firmly pinned down by him. She couldn't move at all. Li Jinan held her chin with one hand and wrapped his fiery lips around hers. He kissed her lightly and deeply. His other hand slowly moved down from her waist and quietly lifted the hem of her dress. Yi Yu thought about it, but she also felt an inexplicable sense of guilt. She hadn't treated him as a boyfriend, but she had gone on a holiday with him in Hawaii. She hadn't treated him as her next boyfriend, but she had gone to bed with him a few times. What does this mean? Yi Yu found it a little strange. At the same time, it was a little exciting. The softness in front of her chest was gripped tightly. An indescribable sense of excitement spread through her entire body. Yi Yu moaned and locked her legs around his. She passively endured the light, shallow, and deep kisses that he planted on her neck. A strange feeling spread from her tailbone. It was like fireworks exploding. It dispersed with a touch, but it was so seductive. Li Jinan's breathing grew heavier. He couldn't wait to remove all of her clothes before he entered her. Yi Yu hugged him tightly. The feeling of being filled was strange and wonderful. No wonder so many people like to do this kind of thing. It's really easy to get addicted. When Li Jinan saw her expression, his movements quickened. In a hoarse voice he asked, "Does it feel good?" Yi Yu was immersed in the world that he had bestowed upon her. When she was caught off guard by his words, it incited the sinful excitement in her heart. Awesome. However, Yi Yu was too embarrassed to open her mouth. She quietly tightened her grip and continued to passively accept and cater to him. When he didn't get an answer, he asked again, "You want it very much too, don't you?" Li Jinan's calm face was tinged with intoxication. He whispered in a hoarse voice, "You look so beautiful like this." Yi Yu felt a wave of embarrassment wash over her. She reached out and pushed his face away. With a reddened face she said, "Stop talking." Li Jinan smiled and lowered his head to kiss her on the lips. He continued kissing her and said, "This is even more beautiful." Ah. Yu was almost out of breath. Slow down, that you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.